table and pledge allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Andrew Benson here, Katrina Binkowitz, Doug Day,
Here.
Joseph Wetmore,
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. Before we go on to item number 4, we're going to do a little housekeeping tonight, switch things around. Number 5 will be number 4, number 4 will be number 5. And then we also have the Cornerstone group here, which will be right after the privilege of the floor, which is number 9. Before we do that, I'd like to make a public announcement. We just got a swift 911 alert from Sheriff Osborne. This pertains to the stabbing that happened today. There is an African American that they're searching for, medium build, and he may be between Collins and Benson Road, which is right up the road from us. So please be aware of that. If you see him or see someone that seems of that description, please call the Sheriff's Department. Do not engage, and alert them, and they'll handle it from there. So that's another reason why the Swift 911 works so well. So that's the description I was given. I asked permission to share it. I have done so. So hopefully he'll be apprehended, and hopefully no one will get hurt. So having said that, we're going to move on to our next item, which is the new number 4, Finger Lakes Land Trust presentation. This is the proposed Cuba Cliffs Land and Water Protection Project. I'm going to mispronounce your name, Max, so I apologize in advance. Max, is that Heitner?
That's correct.
Oh my goodness, even a squirrel gets lucky once in a while. Okay, my friend.
So I want to thank you for having me. I'm here to ask for endorsement from the board to pass a resolution in favor of a grant application for the Finger Lakes Land Trust to acquire as well as hold a conservation easement on a property owned by the Sims family off of 34B, which includes over 4,000 feet of railside lakeshore, a few very drastic rugged gorges directly across the lake from Taganek Falls State Park, mixed hardwood forests, open fields. We think it'll eventually become
Pat, is there something we can do about the feedback that's happening? I'm sure I'm not the only one that's hearing that kind of reverb that. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
I thought that you were the proponent of feedback from the community.
Different kind of feedback. I want it from the community, not the sound system.
Try it out, Max.
How's that? Sound better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. So, so the property is 235 acres. This project would include Finger Lakes Land Trust purchasing about 193.5 acres to maintain as a nature preserve open to the public, and then 40 acres would be retained by the Sims family. That would remain on the local tax rolls, and they would donate a conservation easement on that property, which we would hold. It's a unique property in a great setting, protecting the viewshed from Taganek, another very important publicly accessible place for the residents of Lansing. We're really excited about the potential to purchase this property and create another nature preserve in this part of Tompkins County. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Any questions from the board?
The land now is 193.5 acres, that's Cornell Orchards.
No, so it's owned right now by the Sims family.
Oh, they own,
So this is a different property than the Cornell Orchards.
so are they they're subdividing that then, or they are?
Yeah, so this would be a subdivision where they would retain 40 acres, and then the Finger Lakes Land Trust would own 193 acres.
40 acres where their home is?
That's correct, home and barns.
I just want to say that when I was working on the part of the comprehensive plan in which we talked about, preserving open space and stuff, this is exactly the kind of project that I was hoping would come forth, and so I'm really excited about this one.
Great, we are too.
So just some background here. The Finger Lakes Land Trust approaches a homeowner. The homeowner says, geez, I'd like to do this, this is great. Our role is to give you support so you can get the grant. Maintenance of the property from there, is that the Finger Lakes Land Trust takes over from there, so now they are the owners?
Yeah, the Finger Lakes Land Trust will be fundraising on behalf of this project to come up with a stewardship endowment for the long-term management of the property. So we will own and we will manage the property.
So this is a farm to begin with, right? So it probably has.
So it was a farm, but since the Sims took it over, they've had it in the Conservation Reserve program, but they have not been managing it as a farm for the past many years. So they've been mowing some of the fields, but keeping it just as open meadow for recreational purposes, not harvesting any hay or anything of that nature.
Said in the brief literature that there may be pathways eventually developed that would be maintained by volunteers, would not ask the town for that type of assistance, right? So
That's correct. The Finger Lakes Land Trust has both a stewardship staff team as well as about 200 volunteers who work on trail and other projects for the land trust. So it'll be managed fully by the Finger Lakes Land Trust.
But when I talked to Andy, he was talking about 2 miles of trails that would be open to the public throughout this piece of property.
Yes.
Well, and you bring up a good point, which is now that the ownership is on the Finger Lakes Land Trust, can people walk on that land, or do they need to ask for permission first?
So, the project would go through a resource inventory and then through our management planning process. After that's complete, the property would be open to the public, and like all of our nature preserves, free to all the public. So the plan would be for a parking lot, a gravel parking lot with an entrance kiosk off of 34B, and then some type of loop trail that would take you from there into the woods and back. But it might be a couple, once we own it, it might be some time until that gets established.
I know the Sims, and I think it's extremely generous what they're doing. And they used to have horses, I don't know if they still do, and that's why they had bought that property and the barns, and, but they did, you're right, they did not farm it, it was a farm. But I still think it's extremely generous, and a very nice gift to our town, to our county.
Agreed, we're very grateful.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do then, and if there's no other questions or comments, let's just close this then. And let's move on to number 6 and just get the resolution out of the way.
Unless somebody wants to-
Yes, there's,
Are they selling?
well, no, this is not, I'm sorry.
Oh.
No, you're right. Let's allow comments, go ahead.
Are they selling or donating?
So it's still in discussion, but it'll likely be some type of a bargain sale. So not full market value, but it won't be a full donation either.
Well, whatever landowners want to do, that's up to them. And I'm a firm believer that landowners should be able to do what they want to do with their land. Any other questions, I guess, we'll move on. In that case, let's go to number 6, which is let's entertain a motion.
I'll move number 6.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion or comments? Ms. Song?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Date,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to number 4, which is on number 7. It's like going to Doug's stay. So this is the Village Soils project, presentation. Larry? Tony, how are you?
Good, thank you. Hopefully you all have my handout. If not, let me know, I have a couple of copies.
Can you show it to me so I know which I'm looking at?
It looks like,
Oh, okay, yeah.
Somebody when the board approved the local law in 2017, somebody had the good vision to provide a paragraph that would let us ask for a waiver from the board if our scheduling got complicated. So this waiver that we would ask for from you is simply to delay the building of the community center for a year and be able to start 2 additional buildings. If you read the original local law, we were to only start 3 of the buildings north of Village Circle. We'd like to start 5 north of Village Circle. And the reason for that is, as we've gone along, the first year we built 36 units. The second year we built 43 units. The next year we built 42 units. The next year we built 48 units. The next year, this last year, we built 48 units. In order to keep a continuity of the workforce going, we really need to build 2 buildings a year, and that is what we would like to do, is build 42 units. We have approval with the 3rd permit to start a 24-unit building. What we're asking for is to start the 119 building, which is an 18-unit building. So we would be able to build 42 units in this coming year. The reason that we need to delay the community building is really kind of created by the death of Rocco Buscemi, who controls the other 138 units that are part of the approved PDA, and to give us some time to acquire that part of the project through the trust that was left by Rocco, and possibly to come back to the planning board and ask to move the community building and make it larger so it would serve the whole PDA and be more centrally located in the portion that Rocco controlled. If that doesn't happen, we would just build the community building that's been approved where it's been approved. So we're not asking for any change in the approved PDA by your action here. What we're asking for right now is to delay that a year and be able to start the 2 other buildings. The first of those buildings we would build with 36 this year, and the second of those buildings we would build with the community center the following year. Beyond that, I wrote up the reason. The last time I was here to see you, you asked for a number of things to be addressed. I tried to write what our progress has been on that. We built the dog park. We built a half basketball court. We've come to some agreement with TCAT now on the bus stops, and they've agreed to increase their runs by 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon and have stops within the PDA because of the number of units. They finally realized it's a little village that they're serving now instead of just apartment buildings. The landscaping, any of you have been around there, Katrina's not here, but she toured it and was impressed by the fact that we've overdone the landscaping beyond what was asked for in the approval. And one of the owners, Pete Buscemi, is in the landscape business, so it's well taken care of. I mean, if you've seen it, it's taken care of weekly, not just sort of as an afterthought. We've saved as many of the mature trees as we could along the way, so it gives the project scale, even though they're big buildings. And Steve has added fountains and color to the fountains that seems to make everybody happy this time of year when they're outside. So we've tried to enhance things as we go along. Originally, there was a thought of the pathway system. We built the 8-foot paved pathway. It doesn't connect to anything now, but if the town continues the pathway system east or west, it would be part of that system. At one point, my my son was working with the Pathway Committee and showed them a route all the way down to the lake if they wanted to pursue it. But nothing much has happened. The Krizik women own a farm west of where we are. That would be the next place to go west. And the industrial park is east, or what we might do with the remainder of the 96 acres if we're able to acquire it, would see it go farther to the east. So rather than take up a lot of your time, I think the only thing I didn't provide you to that I might be just suddenly hitting you with is the paragraph 17 is the one that kind of says, why am I here asking you for a waiver? It states pretty succinctly, I'm sorry, why I'm asking you for a waiver, not the planning board or the Board of Appeals. Somebody had the foresight to know that we can't have perfect vision 6 years into the project in terms of the actual scheduling. And beyond that, we have to build 2 buildings every year to keep the workforce intact and also to satisfy the lending agencies. The lending agencies now have seen these 36 or 42 or 48 applications one after the other. They see us filling these units almost 80% filled on the day they're done and ready for occupancy, so demand is certainly there, irrespective of everything else happening. And the things you might be interested in, I mean, we haven't required much, if any, additional infrastructure of the town to do all of this. I mean, the water and sewer were there, serving some old buildings. Some of the old buildings we've actually demolished and built new buildings that are energy efficient, that basically, ironically, when we couldn't go with gas anymore, we went with heat pumps, and we got one of the first awards for energy conservation. So we think we're hitting the mark as far as the need in the town, and that's my pitch.
Does the board have any comments or questions for Larry Capone?
My understanding is the community center was supposed to be an earlier part of this project and has been delayed at least once already. Is that correct?
It was delayed once, correct, by a year already. And we were headed full force until the opportunity presented itself. One thing I didn't mention is with Rocco's death, we purchased the 8 acres just north of the project as well. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to say his death created an opportunity. That's kind of where we are. And there's no way, you know, when we discuss what the apprehension of the board might be of whether to oversee a community center, is it's been committed to the people who live there. So, I mean, they're your best insurance that that's going to happen, or they'll move out.
Well, they certainly are expecting this community center. I think you promised that it's going to be built over
Right,
time.
but you know, they've asked for the dog park. We've responded pretty quickly. You know, we were supposed to put the half basketball court in, but we did a first-class job, I would say, of what we gave them. You know, now we start to see them, you know, we put grills in all around the lake, the first lake. We see them actively used, and, you know, picnic tables, and there's an active community there. One thing I didn't mention is everybody thought we were building student housing, you know. Well, we don't have any undergraduates to speak of, you know. It's pretty much graduate students and people who work in the community. You know, I think I mentioned it in my write-up. It's a cross-section all the way across every, you know, the industries, the high-tech, you know, we got the light industrial park right next door. We got the medical facility in the northeast. We have people who work there. You know, and we have professors and doctors and lawyers and, you know, technicians that work on horse chain. And, it's a very convenient location that way, and even though it's 4 miles from the campus, so it's not in Cortland, and we're not, we may be adding to some of the traffic, but the fact that they've doubled the transit, I think is good for the overall town, not only for us. I mean, with only 2 runs in the morning and the afternoon, we convinced them that only serves the people who work somewhere and want to return from work. It really doesn't promote transit use. Now I think with 4 runs in the morning, 4 in the afternoon. So we're really, you know, we're a small kind of developer in the sense that we're not a billionaire coming in and throwing 140 units down and wondering whether they're going to get filled up. I mean, we're being cautious, and it creates certain problems year to year in terms of getting the next financial package in place. You know, Tompkins County, they funded everything but the last 2 buildings, and then they reached some kind of funding limit, and we had to go searching. We had Elmira Savings Bank pretty much at the part of the last one, and probably the next, we don't know for sure, but M&T is in the discussion for these next 2 buildings. And they all seem, you know, they look at your workforce and their capabilities along with everything else. You know, there are 52 list of things that you have to satisfy every time around. So I'm pleading a little bit with you for your understanding that we'd like to keep the train rolling down the track, and it's been a good project for the town.
I understand there's been a lot of hurdles. I've worked with you at TCAT to try to get that bus stop moved into a place that was, you know, more safe for the people in the community, because crossing that busy road in winter is bad for everybody. And I'm really glad that TCAT was finally able to move the buses in a way that people could have a safe place to get on and off, because I think that's really important. So can you tell me what's the plans for this community center? Because I've seen a lot of maybes and ifs. What exactly have you been telling people you're going to do in it? What are your plans for it to be?
Oh, we've had a recreation center. We've had office space that people could use, not permanently, but if they needed to use an office space, kind of use it on occasion. And then a restaurant, convenience store kind of facility. Now that would grow certainly in scale, you know, and we'd have other activities that we could add, you know, to the recreation center, and sort of a meeting room for the community, and something that, you know, could also double as something that people could use for, you know, a wedding sort of thing, or a party that they wanted to have. I mean, we could increase the scale. Right now, those types of activities, we don't have the square footage in the room in the existing facility. So that's why we're hoping if you give us the year delay and we can acquire that. See, there's another 138 units that are approved as part of the PDA. It would change the whole scale of that community center, and we would work with the planning board to move it more central in the whole project, probably to the east side of the middle road in that area. If you've been up there, we're kind of south of where the dog park and the basketball court are already. So it would make a lot of things come together that honestly we couldn't see happening prior to that. Paco was in his 80s and not actively building toward the end of his life. He was sick pretty much at the end. So.
Is there a problem getting money for a community center?
No.
Units?
No. No.
So what I'm hearing is you want a year delay, not so you can start building the community center, but so you can redo the PDA to expand it to have more things in it,
Yes.
which isn't guaranteed that you're going to get the expanded PDA.
No, and the answer to the question is, if that all fails, if we can't acquire it, then we would build what we plan, and it would be built by December 2021. So there would be no backtracking on what we got approved already. It just would give us the time and the opportunity to make it better. I don't know how else to put it. We're not avoiding anything. And
Well, what concerns me is this is the second delay on the community center, and my understanding of the whole point of creating a PDA was to have the mixed use, and the community center was supposed to be the mixed use element of this project, and that part seems to keep getting pushed away to a further time. And, you know, we have lots of apartments going up, but the residents aren't getting the amenities that was supposed to be a critical part of this project. And it was supposed to be, you know, part of the reading that I'm reading into the laws that were passed, we're saying we want the community center built early in the project, not late, so that the first resident would have the benefit of using it. And as it keeps getting delayed, those residents aren't getting what the town agreed to, which was a dense community with a community center.
yeah, I wouldn't expect you to say anything else to me other than I could tell you we've enhanced what was approved, you know, in a way of there's roughly 3,500 feet of sidewalk for walking, you know, there's another 1,500 feet of walking paths, there's an 8-foot paved path. You know, there's things that are amenities for the community that admittedly aren't the small, you know, exercise facility and small and sort of coffee shop kind of thing that was envisioned in the community center. And I don't,
Well, one of the things I heard envisioned in the community center was a laundromat, so people didn't have to drive quite a distance to be able to use a laundromat facility or pay extra in the rent to have one in their apartment. And so I see that as a real need that people have done without due to the first delay, and now we're talking a year or two delay even further.
they have laundry facilities in every unit.
My understanding is they pay extra for that.
I'm sorry?
My understanding is they pay extra for that.
No, the laundries are in place, you have to pay $1.25.
Well, to be clear, there are two sets of laundries. We already had one laundry on the site. We have 88 units in the Village Legacy apartments, the older units. All those have coin-operated laundry, and those are already available to our tenants if they prefer. And those are at $1.50 per wash and dry, which I don't think you can get that at any commercial laundromat anywhere. So I think that for people who don't want to rent the washer dryers, which it's worth pointing out, about 95% do. It really is a very popular option. But for people who don't wish to rent those, there is a more affordable alternative already.
There's also the issue of the community building, getting back to that for a minute. When we had the original project approved with 177 units, it was a much smaller project. The configuration was completely different. Because we're building in phases, and nobody had built in the Northeast in 50 years, nobody really knew what would fly up there. We did phase one, it was okay, but we saw it needs to make big changes after we were in the middle of phase two. So for phase three, we came back, proposed a new project, much denser, completely different configuration. The board approved it, and the new community center was added at that time. So if we'd gone with the original community center and built it at the original time, we'd have a facility today that would be inadequate.
Which is what we're worried about potentially happening, and which is why we're asking for the delay, because if, depending on what happens, it may or may not end up being inadequate, and that would really not serve the long-term interests of the town, whereas if our plans did turn out and we could build something that's even more spectacular than what we're already planning.
Or the other option is to have two community centers on two different projects so that people, instead of having one huge one, they'd have one closer to their units.
The community center, it would be close walking distance to everybody. Having two is not feasible. Not financially feasible. No backup against that. It's not necessary.
I guess my next question, Ed, are we entertaining a motion tonight, or are we taking this under advisement? I didn't see a motion in our packet.
I still have some comments and questions.
Okay,
Does anybody else have any comments or questions from the board?
I'm okay for now.
Okay, just some background, is that this project, we have a good relationship with. This project is probably one of the reasons why our taxing entities, because of the assessments going up, it's one of the few businesses in Lansing that's thriving. Since we don't have natural gas, we don't have Macon left. The school district has complimented the fact that they can keep their rate where it is because of the increased building. And Village Solars is one of the reasons why. And it has been a energetic relationship. We've had to work very hard to accommodate you sometimes, but you've also worked very hard to accommodate us. In the past, we have had, my recollection, no real problems as far as doing what you said you would do. Having said that, we also have, our superintendent stayed late that one night to get the water hooked up. Our attorney worked late, our engineers worked late on a Friday to move heaven and earth to do this, and I understand that. We try to accommodate you. And we want to encourage you to build more in Lansing because this helps with our tax base, which, as you probably know, the shops of Ithaca just dropped $5 million. They'll go from 19 down to 14 million this year. So as the other thing is that what the good news is, as far as tax base goes, is that the power plant will still be assessed for 20 million this year. They'll go through a pilot starting next year, and we don't know where that's going to go because they're not in the power business anymore. They may go down to 10, they go down to 5. So I try to encourage businesses to come here. We try to have a passionate, energetic dialogue. But having said that, there's also the process. And the process is that we simply just can't change everything on a PDA. I mean, this commercial building was there, which basically makes it a PDA. That's the uniqueness of it. And you guys have done a great job. I'm going to lean on our attorney and our planner to basically give us some guidelines of what can and cannot be done. Because
Just understand, I'm not asking you to change any of the approval, strictly follow paragraph 17 to let us start and have permits earlier. We're not asking you to change anything in the approved PDA. That would only happen if we were successful in buying that property and coming into the planning board and changing the PDA. But the waiver we're asking from you is simply the scheduling and the obtaining of the permits as it's listed.
okay, so let's go deeper in this discussion. Sewer units. I don't know if we have enough sewer units for that next phase for you if, let's say, you purchase it from the Lake Rocco.
Those were approved in the original number that Dave Herrick and Brent and everybody else reviewed. So as far as I know, they're all approved as part of the PDA approval. Brent told me recently now that he's passed what you and the village have presented to the village of Cuba Heights. So as far as I know, we have that original approval was accounted for, and now you have 200 and some additional units as breathing room for that sewer district.
So what I would recommend is that you verify those numbers and not bank on them, verify those numbers. I know that we had the IMA changed so that we'd have a decrease decreased amount of gallons per EDU that freed up some of those as we continue to move towards the meters. But I would strongly urge you to verify that first before you're planning on the amount that you set, the 136. Get that, again, already in writing someplace so that you're comfortable moving forward. Once again, I'm going to ask Guy for some guidance to see what the process is here, to see how, if your wishes can be accommodated. So I'll leave it up to Guy. Can you give us some guidance as far as this goes?
Sure. Section 17 exists to recognize that in large projects, some things change. And it's, for lack of a better term, homage to Section 706 in the land use ordinance. This is a PDA zone. It is part of and created by the PDA process. There's lots of other provisions in the zoning ordinance about how the zoning ordinances and its zones, individually or collectively, are amended. PDA is one such zone. So what this provision does is say that if you need to get a CO or a building permit a little early, you can swap which buildings you want to do. You can make that change without needing to redo the entire PDA. You can make minor adjustments. And the reason that it covers the building permit and CO side is because 706.10, entitled Control of Plan Development, says, after the approval of the final development plan for a PDA, changes, extensions, or modifications of the development may only be made after they have been reviewed by the planning board and approved by the town board. 706.10.1, there's actually a typo, but it's a subdivision of that, says, changes that affect significant elements of the PDA, such as, I read that as such as, but not limited to, but it'll be up to you to read it as you wish. Land use, size, orientation, occupancy, or density of buildings shall require a new PDA submission and approval. So what's that mean? Where's the line? Well, it's not any different than where the line is in certain ZBA actions and where the line is between site planning and special permitting, and that is, you have to determine whether the request is quintessentially administrative, in which case it goes to the planning board for recommendation, and then would come back here for approval of the waiver. Or if it's more legislative, does it go to the heart of what the PDA is, or is it a material change to either the land use planning as written in the zoning or the statement of intent to comply, the document which says this is why it's a PDA, here's why it's in the public interest. If it goes to the legislative side of it, then it requires more activity, such as a PDA submission and amendment to the local law. So the section 17 was put in to make sure that it was understood that merely changing how building permits are tied to conditional approvals, that standing alone does not require an entire new PDA submission. You'll see a similar provision in there for how to redraw lot lines for financing convenience. Okay, those are more, it's designed to cover an administrative end of it. Either way, if it is a PDA amendment, it has to go to the planning board for a formal recommendation of referral as well as seeker review. If it's administrative, if it's informal, then it goes to the planning board on an advising consent under the land use ordinance. So either way, it's going to go to the planning board. The reason it comes here first is because it's a zoning issue. Only the town board can approve a PDA, only the town board can ultimately amend a PDA. So it comes here first, so your options are deny it outright and don't worry about it, because if the planning board recommends it, if you're going to deny it, what's the point of referring it? Or refer it to the planning board and either see what their recommendations are. They're technically your expert on land use planning and are familiar with this project, and they may have input that wouldn't necessarily strike this board. Either way, under section 706, it's got to go to the planning board. If it is in fact an amendment to the PDA itself and requires a full application and a zoning change, then section 1300 of the land use regarding how the zoning ordinance is amended would also apply. But it's largely duplicative of 706. It simply outlines the process for amending zoning, which the land use ordinance does for PDAs already. So my take on it is that I think you have to determine which category it falls into, administrative or legislative. Is it a minor tweak as the applicant is submitting, Or is it major in some way? Or do you want to let the planning board make that call and recommendation to you? It's completely your call. You have the authority to make the final determination, but even if the planning board says, no, we won't do it, and you say, yes, we want to do it, you can overrule them. You are the town board. This is a zoning matter. You ultimately approve not only the zoning, but the statement of intent to comply that outlines why this is a PDA. How is it in the public interest? Why is it a standalone zone? So either way you're going to go to the planning board, the question really is it for consent and advice, or is it for an administrative review of an amended PDA plan of some sort? And either you or someone's got to make that call, and then ultimately you can approve or disapprove the waiver if it's considered a minor change. If it goes to the heart of the element, if it affects a significant element of the PDA, then you should have a PDA amendment application submitted to the planning board and go through the more formal two-step process.
Let me clarify what you just said. We make that call, the planning board would simply, if we send it to them to decide whether it's administrative or substantive, they would just make an advisory opinion, and then we would make a call either way.
Correct. It's like any other PDA. If the planning board makes a recommendation on a zoning change, which they did with the recent zoning changes, they had a number of recommendations, just like the comprehensive plan. 706 has them in more of an advisory capacity. If it's a PDA amendment, it's much more than purely advisory. There's actually a site plan element to the review. So somewhere along the line, someone needs to grasp the nuts and bolts of it and understand exactly where it falls in the continuum, and it's really a legislative determination. Do any of these requests go to the heart of the PDA? Do they affect a significant element of the PDA? And I know, Larry, you mentioned a couple times that there were 2 permits that you were looking to have exemptions for, but I saw only the one in the application, so I didn't follow which was the second building permit exception. I saw a section.
Yeah, the existing law says that I can have 3 permits north of Village Circle.
3 out of 5, right?
Yeah, and I'm asking for all 5 as
Okay.
part of the change. Again, the reason being that one of those would be paired up with the 3rd that I already have approval for, so we could move forward with this next season's construction. The next one would start the construction of the 5th next summer, and at the same time, the community building would be starting at that time. So those 2 would go forward, but they would both start in the summer of, the way it's worded now, I can't get those permits until I have the CO for the community building.
So let me ask you a question, Larry. You have, in the first phase, was building 2 and 22. You have permission to build those, right?
Yeah, they were going to be built last because those are existing buildings that would be knocked down and a new building built in its place. Currently, they're leased out for the next construction season.
Okay, but you have permission to build those. You can knock them down and build right now, right?
I could, but they're all leased out for the next.
No, I'm just asking for clarity. You want 2 more. If you give those up and don't build those, have to come back later, that might be part of the adjustment of a minor PDA. Say you want to trade those 2 at the bottom for the 2 at the top.
Well, we could do that. There's no
You
reason.
still have the number of same units or same buildings you can build.
They're definitely slated to be built last, so we
And
could
you
do
know what I'm
that.
saying is you would have to come back at a later date, redo the PDA to include those in there, but you're basically keeping the same number of permitted buildings to either knock down. And even having said that, it goes back to that community building. And that's the part that is the fly in the ointment here.
Well, I realize that. I've been as open as I can be where.
I'm not implying that you're not. I'm just saying that from a process point, from a PDA point, from a uniqueness point, from a, we've done this 2 or 3 times before point, how do we justify this moving forward? I guess, hypothetically, if you didn't have a situation where you could buy that land, what would you do? If that land didn't come up, if Rocco, bless his heart, was still alive, I know we wouldn't be having this conversation.
We were headed to building the community building as it's approved. You know, this all came up as an opportunity now. I mean, it's kind of strange to say it that way, but, you know, now we have the opportunity to make it more meaningful for the whole PTA.
So because of the fact that Rocco Sr. passed away and the land's available, that's why we're having this conversation?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to bring CJ into this also, since we just want to widen that lens a little farther here. And like I said, it's about the process. If this goes before the planning board, which would be Monday,
So on Monday, the planning board is reviewing the request, the applicant's request to subdivide out Building K. So I believe in the applicant's packet, they included the proposed subdivision. So that's Building K here at the very top, in the top right-hand corner there. And so I believe there was a town board resolution requiring separate metering of all of the buildings, as well as that being Bolton Point's determination. So I believe that's the rationale for why the applicants are subdividing. And of course, feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong.
that, by the way, just to interrupt you, is a different situation we're talking about. Is this building right up here, or extending the road so that it'll apply for that one, so they get a building permit for that? Because they have to have so many feet of road frontage.
Right, so for instance, you can't put a building on the road that doesn't exist, right? So that's kind of a separate matter, but at the same time, the planning board could certainly take under consideration your referral this evening, and also to provide a bit more background. It may not be clear from this site development plan or final development plan what has actually been built. So in phase 1, buildings A, B, and C were built. Buildings 2 and 22 are existing and intended to be demolished, and that would have been, I believe, part of phase 3. Correct me. The cross-hatching is a bit hard to see. So phase 2 was also complete, so buildings D, E, and G/H. And then up into phase 3, I believe I and J were complete as well as 102 and 116. Does this all sound
Correct.
okay? And then phase 4 is where it starts to get a bit more complicated. I believe building 113 is complete, and they are intending to get their, or they did get their certificate of occupancy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. And building K is undergoing subdivision right now, as we just mentioned. That's in front of planning board this coming Monday. Building 36 has, I believe, a demolition permit, and we are awaiting plans from them based on the subdivision moving forward. So that would leave a remaining building permit under the current planned development area as approved for either building M or building 117, as far as I am to understand it.
Building 117 is an existing building, so that's why we're asking to be able to proceed with building M. And then building 117 would be that fifth permit that we would demolish 117 at the same time we get the permit for the community building.
I just want to be clear to the board, though, that if you issue these final 2 building permits, there's no other compelling reason for the applicant to complete building F that I'm aware of.
And building F is the community center?
Yep.
Well, I would say that there's an extremely compelling reason just to interject, which is that it's the anchor building of our entire complex. I mean, we wouldn't, and just to be perfectly honest, if we had proposed this at the beginning and the town board said you can have the apartments but not the community center, we probably wouldn't have gone forward with it, because the community center is a huge part of our plans. So it's, what we're trying to do here is essentially create an anchor building which truly services the town in a way that makes sense in the long term.
By the way, do you think of the community building is to think of, what's the other thing project now?
City
on
Center.
the city center. The community building that's proposed is over 70% apartments. The rest of it is commercial property. It's the only building like it in the town. The only people who have that zoning is us. It's incredibly valuable. I assure you, the furthest thing from our mind would be not to build it. But we're also large landholders in the town with future development plans. And we've only developed a tiny fraction of our land. So if you're worried about having something on us, we have a massive investment in the town, which has yet to be developed.
Well, like I said, Steve, we have a good working relationship, and we wouldn't imply.
Yeah, no, we do, but I'm just responding.
And if it is implied, I apologize, that's not the intent. My intent is to go through with a process so that it can be palatable, yet move hopefully forward, but also follow the rules and regs that we have to go by.
But I just wanted to assure you that this idea that we're trying to avoid building our center is, we just understand where it's coming from.
One thing I would maybe propose is that we're going to have, what, 2 more planning board meetings before we have our next town board meeting?
Yes, that's correct. August 12th, July 22nd, and August 12th.
And since we have to send this back to the planning board anyways, there's a couple of different things that probably need to be verified, which will give you time to do that. Also work with Cricket on that. First of all, sewer allocation, how many units are available that haven't been allocated to some other project or your project? And those 136 that you mentioned, are they actually allocated to your project, or that's?
Yes. Yeah, I will get that, but I know that they figured that 500 number originally with that in it.
I'm simply just going through this whole checklist. The other thing I would recommend is that you're going to give up future constructions of 2 and 22 and trade for the other 2 up there, which means that you won't do anything with those old buildings down there until you come back with a new PDA. It also gives you time to maybe see if this deal goes through or not with the land there, to see if that's a possibility. It's going to give you a month to get a little bit more clarity. I don't know what the temperature of the planning board is. I don't speak for them, nor do I try to influence them. But I think if we go through a methodical process here and say, here's the hardship, and that you're on record have said if Rocco Sr. hadn't passed away, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I truly believe you'd be moving forward on this. So having said all those things, as we move forward on our checklist, and be prepared under CJ's leadership to maybe, first of all, get the subdivision done so you can start working on number K, right, actually letter K, excuse me. And then from there, have a second conversation that night about these different issues.
Well, if I could clarify one thing, the reason for the subdivision is so we could hook water up to K. The move-in date for K, the finish date for K is August 7th. So that building is done, basically ready for occupancy. That's just a point of
I
clarity.
don't think that one has to come back to the town board. Hopefully you can be happy after you walk out of the meeting with that. But that's up to them. It sounds like, though, a lot of the concerns have been addressed, but once again, I'm not going to speak for the planning board because I respect their opinion. These are things, though, we'll have to ask to go back to the planning board for this. And as you get your checklist off and you work so we have clarity, then perhaps the planning board can move forward with the recommendation.
So are we, having followed this whole discussion, are we proceeding as if it's an administrative request?
That's going to be determined, I think, by the planning board, the recommendation. If it's going to be administrative or it's going to be legislative. Now, if it's legislative, we know what that means. That means go through the whole process again.
I understand that. I was under the impression you were making that determination.
We will eventually make that determination. I think Ed wants to ask the opinion of the planning board before we decide that ourselves.
Okay.
Am I correct, Ed? That was...
That's exactly right. I mean, we have to go through the process and go through and respect the opinions of the boards as we go through that. And at the end of the day, when we meet back here in another month, we'll see what they recommend and we'll go from there.
Well, I appreciate your time and forbearance, and we'll certainly follow the process through. I sat on that side of the table for 26 years, so.
You understand that? All right, thank you. Thank you,
Thank you very
guys.
much.
to number 7 on the agenda, which is the resolution approving Nexamp Lansing Renewable Solar decommissioning bond. Did you have a question about that one, Joe?
Yeah, well, when I was looking, which one is this? One of the previous ones. The next amp one I'm fine with. The question is why the other one doesn't have a similar paragraph. We got 2 decommissioning bonds, and one of them talks about the amount being reviewed by the planning department, the town council, the transit advisor. And the next one doesn't say it was reviewed by anybody. And I was curious as to why one was reviewed by this extensive list of people and why the second one was not reviewed, or at least it's not in the motion.
So we're talking about the one for Nexamp, which looks like it went through not a lot of turmoil, right? And then the other one did.
Nexamp went through a bunch, and it was the other one, was it?
It was the tower.
The tower.
It went through a lot.
No,
Other way around.
Other way around.
Okay, you want to take a,
Well, one is regulated by a local law and a lease, and the other is regulated by planning board conditions. One is a solar farm using a lot of acreage in an ag district. One is a postage stamps in an IR zone. One is a solar facility, one is a tower. One didn't have changes after planning board approval, and the other did. So when the next AMP project added battery storage, it changed the decommissioning number other than what was in the planning board resolution, which required additional approval to make sure that the number was engineeringly sound. And because the nature of what was submitted, when Nexan submitted, they submitted a draft, not underwritten. This is what we think we can provide you. When NICEAG submitted, they submitted a fully written bond with an addendum, with the certifications, with the underwriting, with all of the documentation. So one was fully issued, and it met all the requirements in the approval, and the other one was a draft that did not meet all the requirements in the approval. So the next AMP one went through more reviews because it was subjected to more review because of post-approval changes as well as draft submissions. And when it was originally reviewed, it didn't actually have an evergreen clause. So because the planning board conditions are lengthy for the solar farm, but the conditions for the NICEAG communications tower being a utility are not lengthy, they present different risks, and therefore the process of review was different, but both were reviewed. That's sort of the answer.
So where did the 25,000 for the tower, where did that number come from? That came from NICEAG, or that's?
Well, it came from the NICEAG, well, it actually bumped up, because there's a rider to that. But it came from a certification from a NICEAG engineer that I believe was reviewed by the town structural engineer and agreed upon.
Okay.
And what they submitted actually complied, and it actually had an evergreen clause. It had everything it was required to have.
Okay.
Some companies submit something that they call a draft bond that hasn't been gone through underwriting. And if an underwriter hasn't reviewed it, it doesn't count. It's a wish list. So when it got underwritten, some things were changed, and then we added changes to it to cover the increase in the amount as well as the increase in battery storage. So there were additional elements of review for the solar one, including because it also is a different type of bond. Because the tower is a decommissioning, deconstruction requirement. The solar farm actually has land restoration and soil reclamation requirements, ag plans as well. So there's 2 different levels of review, and that's why they read differently. The resolutions were geared to recite that history and to try to address the specific risk each project presented.
So the next AMP one, did they bond to guarantee the work, not a bond to guarantee a certain amount?
It is a bond to guarantee disconnection from the grid, decommissioning, removal, and disposal of all the facilities, and reclamation and restoration of the agricultural land.
And whatever that ends up costing, whatever that ends up happening.
Well, that amount was calculated, reviewed, and approved by the planning board after the original site plan approval. They added some battery rack storage to it, which increased the decommissioning cost because the batteries are in sort of bulletproof housings that go on the rack system. So there's additional decommissioning and structural removal. Those numbers had to be updated and reviewed, and all that happened. So there was a much more involved process for the next AMP1, which makes sense because it's acres of solar panels as opposed to one monopole with a nice antenna on it.
Okay, so we've got a figure of 266,308, that's in the bottom paragraph. Does that get adjusted for inflation and there are changes over time?
The planning board approved, it starts there, and each year it must go up by 2.5%.
Okay, and we just hope inflation doesn't go up by a greater amount over the life of this. That's the way.
Not necessarily the way I would have done it, but given that, although we did not permit recycling and certain costs to reduce the amount that has to be bonded, the fact of the matter is that as much as you may like or dislike what is inside of a solar panel, the industry is pretty good at recycling its own products. And so the thought is that 2.5% should be sufficient, but the solar local law may trump that at some point. The tower commissioning law has a requirement that every so many years a new engineering estimate is provided as to the updated decommissioning costs. And then you have to provide a bond in that updated amount. So yeah, there is a concern at 2.5%. It probably is sufficient given the ever-increasing recycling value of things like cadmium telluride, but you know, I don't have that kind of prescience to know what that market would do. But that's what was approved, a 2.5% per year escalator.
But they don't actually have to decommission this at some point. So is there a time limit on this? They can just put new solar panels on and keep running for as long as they...
They could. The law, as well as the approval, has triggers as to what constitutes obsolescence, abandonment, or decommission.
Right, but if they want to go 100 years, they can go 100 years, assuming their lease on the land continues and this...
In a perfect world, that's exactly what they would do. Upgrade the technology as needed, replace the panels as required.
And the bond would just extend, or do we have to...
The bond would keep going year to year to year to year to year.
At the 2%, is there a point where we can intersect and say 50 years from now, say this number needs to be refigured?
Well, there would be a point at which the changes, whether it was upgrades or the changes to the system would trigger a new site plan review, and then you'd re-review the issue. As long as it's routine maintenance, no, you wouldn't necessarily be on this bond. So if the plan was to replace all the panels, that might be a substantial change that could trigger site plan review because it's not just maintenance. And then you could revisit the bond issue if you needed to. If 2.5% is working.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think in the future, for people in the future that are dealing with this, I don't want to hand them a headache.
Well,
It was designed on a 30-year lifespan, but hopefully it'll last longer than that, but I don't think anyone really knows. They haven't really lasted longer than 30 years in the American Southwest, but it's also an older generation of product.
Well, get to, for instance, an example, the next amp of batteries. Batteries, my understanding, the lifespan about 5 years. They put a new battery, let's say, okay, hypothetically, they were 5 years. I'll use that word, like a software. So in 5 years, they put a new battery system in. Now, if there is a whole change in these dynamics, then they have to go back to get reviewed because maybe the cost has to be, or the solar panels are changed so that they're much more sophisticated. They actually can do it 40%, 50%, 80%. That's something that might trigger review from site plan. They may recommend going back to the bond.
I mean, they could even switch, instead of using batteries as standby power, to use batteries as
the primary?
Well, no, a lot of times what some solar systems are using their battery backup for, since once a battery gets up to full, is they periodically come in and swap out the batteries, bring empties in, get them charged up, take the full ones and cycle them into vehicles and other uses. There's a whole separate retail market for fully charged batteries. but I don't know that technology well enough. And I know they're still experimenting with things other than lithium ion and some of the more modern, for lack of a better term, variants.
Well, if they follow other technologies, I suspect that it'll be better, cheaper, last longer. But getting back to this question, did we satisfy? Did you get your answers?
I did, thank you.
Okay, are we in a good spot now?
I think so.
All right. Any other discussion, I guess, before we enter a motion on this resolution for approving Nexamp Lansing Renewable Solar Decommissioning Bond?
I'll move it.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson,
Yes.
Doug Dake,
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore,
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item number, audit presentation by Insero and Company, CPA LLP, Patrick George, and Conrad. Conrad's been here so much, his mail started to come to our business. Really good to see his smiling face.
I do have paper copies of everything, but you hand out, if you don't want all the paperwork, let me know. Some of the documents, we'll probably not look at each one of them. And this was mailed out or emailed out about a week ago.
Yes.
Nothing has changed except for the executive summary.
Now, just to give you some background while Patrick's handing this stuff out, this is a preliminary. This isn't the final. We're still waiting for Bolton Point to give us their figures, which I think is going to be in September.
Which we have a draft I'll talk about.
Okay, okay, so this is just a preliminary now. There'll still be time for discussion, for review from our residents and everything else. But this is just the initial discussion.
Right, and we're going to just do a pretty brief, try to keep it brief with a top overview of some of the highlights. Not get too deep into the numbers at this point. You've had it just a week, and I didn't want to hand it out in this print draft copy because some of the pages lay out facing, and it's really hard to see on the computer screen both sides of it, the document page. So you have it. We'll probably give you a chance to accumulate questions. Like we did that last year, send us some questions, have some time to properly respond to them, and then possibly come back at the next meeting. We also did wait for that Bolton Point report last year, and we ended up presenting to you in about October, November maybe. So we wanted to at least roll that number forward, your interest in your joint venture interest in Bolton Point, your 20% or so. So we just rolled that forward for now. We do have a preliminary draft of the change, which will increase your equity interest for the year. And I'll talk about that after we go through the funds. So I also wanted to put everything in and summarize the documents that we issued, primarily focus on the funds, your fund financial statements, your general funds, highway funds, water, sewer, because that's really what really runs your budget and your operations. We have this conversion to the government-wide, where we add in the capital assets and the debt and all that we'll talk about briefly. But main focus is really on the funds. And I don't believe we presented it this way last year, but we have some five-year condensed financial information for all the major funds that you have. So the first page past the cover of the executive summary is the report, our report and findings. It has down the left all the reports that we issue, down the right the results. In all cases, the results are very positive. Unmodified opinions are good. Modifications are departures from generally accepted accounting principles. So we have on your basic financial statement, unmodified clean opinion. There's additional supplementary information, same thing there, unmodified. There's a report, a government auditing standard report that covers your internal control and your compliance with laws and regulations. This report identified no material internal control weaknesses at the financial statement level or non-compliance. There's a separate document that's required, a required communication with those charged with governance. And it talks about these 9 or so bulleted items here. Qualitative aspects, difficulties, corrective misstatements, disagreements with management. Qualitative aspects are just, in that letter, just points to you where accounting policies, the significant accounting policies for the town can be found. In the notes to the financial statements, it talks about also very more specific, important detail, footnote disclosures, your capital assets in more detail, your debt. So that letter points the board to those areas to look at in conjunction with the financial statement itself. The remainder is really any difficulties, any problems that we encountered, disagreements with managers. Nothing in that letter that was any negative regarding the audit process or our ability to perform our audit or get obtaining information. There's a management comment letter that talks just about a couple of recommendations that we have. That's a little bit like that government auditing standard letter about internal control laws with regulations. It's not required, but we point out there a couple of things. And I think one you've already addressed is to up your capitalization threshold. So you've already acted on that. The other is just a way to possibly segregate duties a little bit further. So those are just other matters. They're not significant deficiencies. They're not material weaknesses or anything. But what we put in that letter is as well as upcoming accounting standard updates that may affect you that we'll have to evaluate. So there's several that are pointed out in that mentioned comment letter. There's one more document. We also, during our audit process, we look at the justice courts. And as you see here, it's for the purpose of determining whether the courts properly collected, recorded, and remitted bail fines and other charges. And there we say that the results for the transactions tested, they complied with the terms and conditions of those requirements. So all very positive in the overall process. Any questions before I will get into starting on page 2 is all of the funds, condensed 5-year. Again, not too deep there. Just the main point is if you look at over this 5-year period, it's been very steady, slight increase in fund balances. Starting with page 2, the general townwide fund. You can see your fund balance, 1.8 million. Grew a little bit, or up and down small swings, but you're now at 2 million. So just again, very steady with an upward trend there. There's categories non-spendable. Basically, you're just offset with your prepaid expenses at the top. Restricted are your reserves that you set up. Assigned is what you appropriated for next year with next year's budget. So you've set aside or budgeted $90,000 more in expenses than revenues to spend down that fund balance slightly. And unassigned is just the remaining. So that's all unrestricted, unreserved, undedicated. That's the main. Again, the bigger of the 2 general funds, they're both good size, but the revenues on page 3, again, you can see total revenues, the specific line items for all of the revenues, pretty consistent again. There was a big step up in sale of property, as you're aware, this year, about $350,000 compared to the typical 50, 60, 70,000. State sales is also.
So Patrick, even if you take that 353 out of there, that's like usually a one-time shot.
Yeah.
That's not consistent. You're still going to be at 2,100,000, which is still
right.
The trend upward.
Yep. State sources higher.
Looking at about $100,000. Looking at about $100,000 increase without the entire sale of property line. If you're looking at with about 80,000, you're looking at about maybe $80,000. So you're still looking at a big increase, an increase in your revenues.
Well, I personally feel good about that considering all the stuff we've done here. They're still increasing.
And also on the expense side, you can see a decline in what you spent. Transportation is probably the bigger area there. We talked about that.
That's the highway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the highway superintendent. Thank you.
So net increase in net assets in that fund, or fund balance, I should say, in that fund, $465,000 this year. So definitely more positive than the prior 4, but again, all in all, I would say pretty consistent with fund balances from the forward period. 4 and 5 are your general town outside village. Again, same type of thing. It's steadily decreasing. The bulk of that is just all unassigned. Again, we get non-spendables, the offset of the prepaid expenses at the top. So I won't get too much into the details of the numbers. We'll see each of the other funds pretty much consistent with the theme here. Page 5 on the general town outside is the incoming expenditures with a net increase in that fund of $107,000 for the year. Third line up from the bottom. 2 highway funds next. You have roughly $300,000 in the highway townwide fund, so not a huge amount of fund balance there. Again, very consistent over the period. Some restricted, some reserves there as well. And then on 7 is the income and expense for that fund. So on that side, transportation did go up a little bit. Revenues also. And there was also proceeds of obligations of $115,000. Highway part town, the last of the for water and sewer anyway, is page 8 and 9. Again, won't get too much into the detail of the numbers, but about $1,004,000 of fund balance. Most of it unassigned, up from about $778 back in 2014. Revenues and expenses on page 9. Just going to go through 221,065 increase in that fund for the year. So sewer and water are the next and last. Again, you see about 289,000 fund balance in sewer, slightly up over the years. $1.6 million on page 12 for water. And so what we didn't present on a 5-year basis is the capital fund, and that's just holding your bond anticipation notes of about $2.5 million, I think, is in there. And so if you put them all together, you have about $3.3 million in fund balance, but that also takes into consideration a negative $2.5 in fund balance of capital, because that's just temporary financing. You pay
You're talking about the barns? You say
the
temporary
bands.
financing?
The bands are temporary in the capital
Right.
fund.
Yeah.
Right, we talked about it earlier, that we're still doing barns now because we can't lock into a bond because interest is so
Right.
low.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great problem to have, I guess, because and we'll do one tonight, by the way, for the Warren Road Sewer District. We're going to renew our barn tonight at 2.5%, which, like I said, I guess these are good problems to have.
I wanted to talk about page 14, we did last year, and in 2017 was the first year you stepped up to this, what we call the government-wide financial statements. The industry, the state in particular, didn't really want us to just present on the funds. They wanted a full picture with the infrastructure, the capital assets, the debt, and also really forced you to step up. And so this is what the reconciliation, which is part of the, I think it's on page 8 or so, the full financial statement, just taken out of. So there's your $3.3 million in fund balances. We're adding in capital assets of $12 million. Your equity interest in the bulletin point. So right now we just roll forward $1,359,000 of your equity interest. That's an asset on your government-wide. They had the restatement like you did for this GASB 75 adoption for the post-retirement health insurance. So that actually was an increase in their statement, as well as just the basic increase based on the current year results, the 2018 results. That's $122,000. So we're just going to put those together. We're not going to restate your net assets for that $73,000. It's not material in our opinion. So we do have to add $196,651 there to your assets still. And we didn't have that by the time the draft went out. We didn't realize it was going to come 2 days later. That draft that Charlene sent us.
Okay.
So that's the only known change that we're going to make is roll that additional increase of about 200,000 through in assets and net assets and change in net assets. On the other flip side, the deductions from your, what's not in your fund financial statements are your bonds, your installment purchase debt, accrued interest on bonds, comp absences, and these other newer liabilities, your share of the ERS system liability, your proportionate share, that's about 59,000, which is thrown in as a liability on your government-wide, as well as that other post-retirement, post-employment benefit, that's the retiree health insurance that we asked you to get a full valuation report last year to adopt that. Actually, it adopted it a year early, since we were going to the GASB 35 model. I also put on here, well, any questions before the last thing is, everything wasn't perfect. We have a note disclosure number 13 where during the current year between Conrad and Charlie, it was determined that we're not aware, well, we didn't realize that the bone plane water tank.
The bone plane water tank, which should have been added as infrastructure in as the building in the prior year, was not actually added. So through conversations between myself and Charmaine, we determined the exact cost to the town that took on in 15 and 16, and we had to add back in that cost, that actual building in 2018, and restate the 2017 financial statements for that amount.
So you made those adjustments?
Yeah.
So we did make those
So
adjustments.
that's an upward adjustment of $1 million to 1.8 million in your government-wide assets, not your funds. It doesn't affect your funds at all.
When we were talking about this before, it's amazing how water lines are an asset. Never thought of that. Well, sewer lines are an asset, but I guess they are.
The other thing is you're only required, when this GASB 34 took effect, you didn't have to go backwards and pick up anything just going forward from that point, or you could pick and choose whatever you wanted to include going forward from that date. This is what, 15 years now, it's been probably. And so it's kind of arbitrary, plus your internal capitalization policy too, what you want to actually include. One more item that, and we don't consider this in this statement. I mean, we're the primary, take your fund balances, your fund financial statements, and do this conversion, assist in it. And so, it's our apologies for us not getting it right the first time through.
Well, in all fairness, though, we went to a deeper examination this time than we did the preliminary, and once again, I encourage it, because if there's anything that we need to move the needle a little bit now, and we already do that, then I have to do some drastic correction later on that we weren't aware of, so I think it could be more thorough.
One other thing that does affect the fund financial statements that we also had to restate, actually, Charmaine found out during the year that the bonds are not part of your funds. The bonds are just part of your long-term account group off your fund financial statements. The funds just pay those bonds down. The bonds are typically part of your capital fund or another fund as a liability. 80% of them were included. There's about, well, 400,000 here that you kind of treated as bonds. We were okay with that. The state had been okay with that for years and years. This time through, they said, no, you need to bring them into the capital fund. So we did restate the capital fund and include the rest of those bands, of 400,000. There's a couple of things that we did have to correct this year, but again, they were included in the government-wide in both areas, but it didn't have to get moved from basically your long-term account group into the fund financial statements. And really, that's really what I wanted to cover. Try to keep it brief, having you have a chance to look at the statements, accumulate your questions, do it however you want, come back next month or in between or however.
What we can do is we can pass these on. If you have any questions, we can send them to you directly. We can send them back to all the board members. We'll CC everybody on that, go back and forth on this. If need be, we can accumulate these and put them on the web if there's questions about this. I mean, any way you want to do this to communicate to the residents about these things. Does the board have any questions at this time? If we have time, this is just the initial meeting, but to kind of give a general snapshot, but you have the draft. And like I said, I don't know if this thing can be done in August or September. We're still waiting on both points, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I guess our understanding is they may act early in August to finalize that draft report, so then we'll be ready. We've already started to make that.
We've started the process of actually implementing the numbers into the computer financials. So basically, both your equity interest into the joint venture now is going to be $1.5 million instead of the $1.3 million that it was in the pre-written prior year.
So is that an increase in revenue or?
It does, it
Well,
shows
or the increase in asset?
It's an increase in asset, and it's just a change, it's called change in equity interest. It's not a revenue.
It's not really a revenue or an expense, it's just, it does move the needle on the safety of activities, but it's not really a revenue or an expense.
Sure.
So I have questions here, we're going over the draft financial report. So if you turn to page 4G.
Are you on the big one?
Yeah, on the big one. I didn't have the small one until just
Go
now.
ahead.
So I'm looking at figure 5, the capital project fund. Now that doesn't match my last year's report for the 2017 number because you're adjusting it.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if we should put some kind of note saying that it's not going to match the report that we have from last year, just so someone who's comparing the two would understand.
We did allow to look into how it has to be disclosed, and it's basically recommended that we don't have restated throughout the document in the tables and all that, but there's a paragraph in the auditor's report that
Yeah, I saw
talks
that
about
in
that,
front.
points you to the footnote. But it's really, again, as I said, it's typically not mentioned in the tables and charts what numbers are restated.
So again,
Footnote disclosure.
in figure 6, the buildings number is changed as a result too?
Yes.
Okay. And it says here the land, I'm looking at figure 6, land of 528, a dollar change of 27,000. Can you explain to me what that is describing?
There was a sale there was a sale in the current, in 2018 that we had to run through the financials as well.
Didn't we have a $260,000 sale of land during 2018?
337,000.
So it can be a difference between what your cost in the land is and what the actual sale price of the land is.
I'm not sure how that comes down to 27,000. I'm confused. We sold $300,000 worth of land, and you're saying there's a difference of 27,000, and then we have a total land value of 500,000. I'm not understanding those numbers.
So the numbers that are in here for your land are actually your historical costs, whatever purchase price, however way back the land was actually purchased at. We don't, for the purposes of this, revalue your land for our financial purposes. So whatever costs these the land came in at, is what we actually value them at.
So if it was donated to the town, it comes in at zero.
It should. It's just not the set price, right? Yeah, I assume Charlie was able to get that exact detailed cost that was on the books for him.
So if you do it that way over time, if we sell enough chunks of land, we might actually end up with a negative number there for the land value?
No, you'll never end up, so
You subtract what we
Well,
paid
you would
for.
if we use the purchase price, that would happen, but no, not take off what was listed at the cost.
Originally.
Yeah, the
Now,
historical
how do you
cost.
figure that on the town center land, which I know was purchased at one point, and then there's a payoff to the state as part of that to free it up, and then we sell a small chunk of it. How do you work it out? Because we're selling different pieces at different prices, and I'm not sure how you subtract at that point.
I'll have to review that.
It was sold for 106,000, and then the deed restrictions were lifted. I think that was 284.
Something like that,
It
yeah.
came to
Yeah,
around
there was two
400,000.
purchases.
At the end of the day, it was $400,000 to bring it up to where we could actually utilize it for selling it to Cornerstone or whoever. But when it first came, it was $106,000 that the town bought it for. And then, must have been 6-7 years ago, a guy worked on a project to get the deed restrictions lifted. Before that, it was just recreational.
Yep.
That's why one time it was proposed to have a golf course there, but nothing else. And then from there, so it's around 400,000. I think it actually came up just exactly 400,000 for some reason. But that number sticks in my mind. So like I said, that is probably what the value of all the land is. So maybe if you take a percent of that, I don't know, of that 154 acres, and you divide that out. We also have to look at probably the appraisal to see what lots were appraised for such. But even if you do the 13.9 acres that was sold, and you take that percent of 154 and multiply that by 400, that's probably what the value of that parcel was.
Does that come to 27,000? That's.
I'm simply answering their question. I'm not defending their math.
No, I know, I'm just.
But on the other hand, like I said, and in all fairness, this is a work in progress as well as we share information. But I think that is additional information that you may not have been aware of. That cost to lift the deed restrictions probably should have been listed in that cost of the land also.
Cost of land.
Probably has an improvement.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to understand here, so I'm
Sure.
asking a question. Cricket, do we own any bridges in the town?
No, county owns all the bridges.
Right, in the paragraph above, it listed as one of our capital assets, buildings, machinery, equipment, roads, and bridges. We probably should cross that out since we don't own any bridges.
That's just it.
I know it's a standard boilerplate, it just kind of bothers me when it goes by. Another one that bothers me, if you go to page 12, financial reporting entity, second paragraph, second line, next to last word, council men. We're not all men on this council, so that should be gender neutral, please.
Which line?
Second paragraph under financial reporting entity, which would be the third paragraph, just under New York. And so, page 38. So from what you said to me now, my understanding is that these are just placeholder numbers that you put here, and that's why the date's 2017, because you don't have the actual numbers yet.
Yes.
And then page 50, note number 2. Can you explain that to me a little more clearly? I'm not following that.
All governments are required to mention any over expenditures. So you didn't make a budget modification to cover the $28 for the transfer from one fund to another. And so we have to disclose everything regardless of materiality. So we show here over expenditures that were matched by a budget modification.
So these are three things that should have been modified in the budget, and were not in the end, and that's just a mistake. It should have gone through the process and gotten modified.
We show the complete budget and actual schedules or statements for all the funds, so you can see how much resources were available to make those transfers and modifications if you had to.
One of the recommendations that you recommended and we did change was to change the amounts for small purchases. That's been ongoing for us for years. What changed from last year to this year that flagged that for you? I'm just curious.
In terms of it being written within this,
Yeah, it wasn't in last year's report, it's in this year's report.
I think when we go through the process of looking at findings, we may have findings for a couple of years. The first year, we may talk about it verbally with Ed and with Charmaine. But going into the second year, if it starts to become a recurring finding, then it's something that we may bring to the management comment letter as a written finding to bring to the board as a whole. In this situation, it's different in this situation because we talked about it with both Ed and Charmaine during the audit, and they did tell us that there was swift action on the board's part to actually update these numbers. So that's how it ended up showing up on the benchmark complex this year. And we did know that, we know that going in that it was actually taken care of by the board, but in fiscal year 19 and not fiscal year 18.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually really.
Well, what happened actually was that as we tried to implement these changes, we found out that there was a concern already being addressed, and I think your findings actually gave it more validity. And what we did is we tried to, once you implemented, you tried to apply it realistically, and we got the feedback from our different department heads, like our rec department, rec, and our highway superintendent gave us great feedback on really what the reality is when you try to implement these and the negative consequences if we continue down that path as opposed to taking your recommendation. So once again, I think it was something that was suggested, it was verified by realistic implementation, and now we've adjusted it accordingly. Because we were down a path where people wouldn't even give us bids. Because why? You're not going to take it anyways, and we were headed down that way. So what should have been, with good intentions to make it easier, actually would have made it harder. And that's out of their mouths, not mine. And I respect their opinions. So thank you.
I think the other question was how much staff time were we spending versus how much benefit we were getting. I think that's a large part of your argument too.
Right. I think that was Mimi? Mimi, she actually recommended that. She goes, this seems to be a lot of staff time and really isn't cost effective when you're paying somebody to do this.
Well, I'd like to understand a little bit more what you are suggesting under segregation of duties. And again, this comes up this year, all of a sudden, what's changing and what would you like, what kind of things are you talking about changing?
Charlie, right, has a lot of control over data entry at various levels without, I guess, authorization requirements.
You want to have an extra set of eyes on there, doesn't do anything just to validate it. If anything is to protect our bookkeeper.
Yeah, so how, give me a couple of scenarios on how you would suggest implementing that.
Specifics again.
I think specifics had to do with payroll and just being able, once payroll entry is done, having someone to be able to review to make sure that all payroll entries are correct and everyone is getting paid the correct amount and there are no improprieties or anything is done incorrectly. Not that we're suspecting it, but just to be able to, as I said, just give her another level of protection in terms of knowing that not only she is the one preparing and reviewing, so if any situation does come up, that she's not the only one to be looked.
I understand, it's trust and verify, and so you're saying this is really around payroll entry that another set of eyes needs to be looked at, or is there a broader picture there that needs to be looked at?
I think in the specific that we looked at had to do with payroll, but overall, all the financials of the town should be trusted and verified by not just one set of eyes.
I'm just trying to get a picture of what you would suggest, and just an idea of how you would suggest implementing that.
Well, when you go with payroll, you're basically trusting the department has to put down, unless you want to go to a time clock. You simply have to go by what they verify, and they're responsible. And if they, once again, they have to be accurate. And then we look at those numbers also. If there's a spike, and you can ask Patrick this, I ask him questions like, okay, what happened on so-and-so week? I had this, this, and this. You had a few calls last week. I had an algae bloom crisis to go to, amongst others. So when we look at these things, we see, okay, where they are. Having said that, it probably shouldn't be me asking these questions. It probably should be another board member. So whoever wants to volunteer for that, besides myself, I welcome that. To look over those and say, okay, what about payroll? What's this going on here? What's this going on there? What about comp time? What about this? Another set of eyes besides the bookkeeper and the supervisor should look at those. And any one of the other 4 board members would probably be an excellent choice.
Is that what you're suggesting, or are you suggesting divvying up staff duties differently or something?
Well, depends on availability. I don't think you have a lot of availability to have other staff do it.
If you want to delegate another staff member, maybe somebody from the clerk's office.
I'm just trying to find out what your recommendations are, a little bit more detail so that,
Right,
you know,
it
we can
was
talk.
pretty big. Yeah. We talked about it.
Well, we do this with vouchers.
We,
We do this with vouchers all the time. They're all signed by 2 board members.
we talked, when we had our exhibit, that we would probably want to strengthen the language in those comments when it goes final for more specifics, more specific recommendations. It's a little bit brief.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'd like to have some ideas of what would suffice for a second set of eyes, and how you'd like this, and not necessarily just to do it this way, but, you know, what you're looking for in terms of control, so that I'm actually doing what you're saying as opposed to what I'm guessing you're saying, which is what I feel like you're doing now.
You have other municipalities that perhaps implement these.
Yes.
You can probably give us some examples of success stories of how they are implemented and are sufficient.
That'd be excellent to see some examples.
Good.
That's my question for now.
Anybody else? Okay.
Well, just to end, we didn't really give credit to Charmaine as much as we should. She really does a great job.
I agree.
Reading the books, definitely want
Thank
to
you.
give her some credit there.
And thank you for you guys for taking the initiative to get this done earlier. I really appreciate it. Because now this year and last year especially be a little more thorough, right? So initially, I guess, looking at all the 5 years and the projections, it looks like, and I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like that the town's healthy.
That's what we, the name of the 5-year trend here.
So if we were a patient, we could buy green bananas.
I appreciate that you talk in plain English.
Yeah.
I can understand what you're saying.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Conrad. And also, Patty.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a sheet for the privilege of the board? So any questions, please, I guess we'll send it to Charmaine and she'll send them on and back and forth, okay? No one?
Shall I just note that Ruth and Roger sent in a letter for public comment on an issue that we've already voted on, so I don't think we need to read it over again, but all the board members got a copy?
Yeah. Okay. All right, item 10. And in your packet, we have the Lansing Community Library report. And all good information. Oh, I'm sorry. You can move Cornerstone up. Want to do that?
You did.
I did, right? Oh, we have Cornerstone now. So it's what, 3-hour drive home? On that? Okay, come on up.
Hello,
Hi.
Carol Webster, here to talk about the road that was constructed across the street, resolution for dedication.
Okay, so this will be actually item number 26 we're looking at.
Yeah.
And obviously we're going to start with just thank you guys for reminding me, because I didn't do that.
You did say it earlier, and
No, I
we have to
did.
go to Rochester, so I figured.
Yes.
Thank you, Pat.
Is there any questions or for Carol? We seem to have the approval of our highway superintendent and our engineer and our attorney and all the boxes checked off and our planner. And for the first phase of this, right? This is not the final. This is so I'll leave it up. Any questions from the town board for Carol?
I just got this, so I have not read this over carefully. Can you tell me what it is we're agreeing to?
What we're agreeing to is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that for the first phase of the road, is that correct? Cricket? First phase of the road, they have the base down, they've made it satisfactory, they won't top coat it until the final is, okay? It's very similar to what we've done with other developers. But that allows them to get in and start renting their apartments. They also will move the gate.
Tomorrow morning.
Thank you. And that way, that'll prevent anybody from going further in there. But as these apartments become available, we also allow them to be working in the phases. And when the third phase comes along, of the last 3 apartments, I think, or the last phase, excuse me, they won't get COs until everything has been up to satisfactory, and our highway superintendent gives us the blessing. And even then, that top coat it's your responsibility for a year afterwards. Is that correct, Cricket?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So what happens if they stop building? If they're ever going to stop at this phase?
Carol, you going to stop this phase?
No. We'll build all 72 apartments.
I mean, you have the allocation of funds for this.
Yes, we do. And we plan to top coat for the 3 final CMOs roughly October for the plants, the asphalt plants close.
October of this year?
Yes,
And you're still accepting applications?
yes. We have 50 for the 72 apartments
Okay.
so far.
And if people want an application, they can go down to the Cornerstone, which is it Cuba View?
Correct.
Down there where, for us old timers, right behind the old Jamesway building, on the Cinnamon Drive. And that is where the management team will be, and you also drop your application off, is that correct?
Correct. And soon they'll be in the community building, the first building across the street, and operating out of there.
Once we dedicate the road, once people can get up and they can pick them
And
up
get
there.
a CMO. Yes.
Perfect.
So what would signify the date of acceptance and dedication of the entire
Well, first of all, they have to complete all of their punch list, everything done. Then, Cricket would give them the go-ahead to do that. They would not get the COs for the last 3 buildings until everything has been completed.
Yeah, I'm looking at item 5 here, where it says the 1-year warranty starts from the date of acceptance, and I'm trying to understand when that date, how that date is determined.
Be a resolution like this one that would accept the final top coating, the final infrastructure, and declaring the opening of the second segment of the road. So there'd be a town board resolution you could measure from.
Okay, so the whole road is guaranteed after the second part of the road is open?
Correct, well, yeah, once it's completely finished, top coated and.
But the whole road is guaranteed through the period of the second road being accepted?
Right, 1 year from the date of final dedication is the warranty period.
Final dedication.
Right. And that would be the board meeting date for?
When it's done.
Yeah.
October is the target, by
But
the time we get done with the mapping.
whenever we vote on it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's when the clock starts ticking.
Right, and this was part of this was structured out in the planning board approval and in the plans for the roadway. The thought was we didn't want heavy construction equipment going over the top coat. But you have to have a highway suitably improved to get the permits and.
And for the next 6 months, if the trucks mess up the road, they're gonna fix it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
I'll move it.
I have any other questions? I'll second it. Any further discussion?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Ed Levine.
Yes. Have a very happy drive home.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
Okay, now, as we're all over the place here, that's okay, it's all good.
You say it's all good, Jessica just got straightened out tomorrow.
Jessica's good.
Yes. I know you'll do it, just we're making more work for you and I recognize it.
Lansing Community Library Report, we have that in our packet. We also have item 11, Lansing Youth Services Report. We also have Tompkins County Letter Mike Sidler's report. We have Pat Terrell's report. Pat Terrell.
Oh, you want me to speak?
We got one.
Careful.
Only, I think you've got a few thousand reasons why we should speak, right?
Probably got 1.5,
I know, I got the advertising, I got the main event. goes out to Lynn Day. On the Friday, I came down here with Lynn, and the door, so let him in, and we took out 4 buckets full of water as it was running down the walls. Lost a few more tiles, but Lynn also on his day off on Friday, I think we were closed that day on July 5th. We straightened that out, and hopefully the air conditioner won't have no problem. So thank you for that. That's the first thing. Secondly, thank you for handling the algae bloom. That was not an easy thing to do, but we had to shut down the beaches. The lifeguard was there. You can put those signs where people are allowed to swim. You also took it upon yourself to close the gate to Salt Point, even though there's no swimming there. You still did that so people wouldn't put their kayaks and stuff in. I appreciate that. You are also now, as with the teachable moment, we have our signs for next time. We can jump on that. We have to go by the health department, even though people were upset about that. But safety first, and I thank you for going above and beyond, because that's what we do. We do value. So thank you so much for doing that. Now,
good news, health department cleared us a short while ago, so we are reopened. So
good.
For now.
yeah, good for now.
For now. But once again, things happen, you move quickly, so I appreciate that. So now I'll move the floor. Go ahead.
I don't have a whole lot after that.
Well,
That's my bedtime.
Let me just pull us along then. Well, once again, kudos to you and Cricket for coming up with a concept and a plan. As you know, now that the road is going to be dedicated, Cricket, our SAMS grant came through, which allows the $75,000 to move the Woods Edge Road over, so it's lined up with the road we just dedicated there part way. And having said that, now we have concern about the kids close to the road, and you have come up with these ideas to put a fence up. It's going to require $4,000, and you would like the board to authorize some money to allocate you to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, please. Yep.
Okay.
Just to the concern of safety of the kids and the parents. As all of you know, there's a field right there. Obviously, we're losing some parking there. There is a guardrail there. I don't feel that would probably hold most children back, so I think the fence is our best option.
Will we park on the other side of the road as it gets moved over? Cricket? No.
Safety-wise, I don't think that's a smart.
No, even though they all park there now, but.
Well, right, well, we're gonna, the new Woods Edge signs, potentially going there and working with those folks on that. Obviously, one of my big concerns, and when Pat and I talked about that, is kind of shifting the road, not creating a parking lot, so to speak, for the people who live around the other side of the road. Not the people who park on the side of the road, they may anyways. But we don't want to invite, a bunch of parking to feel like you're now parking cars in people's yards versus on fields. So it'll be a green space with, encouraging signs to not park.
Yeah, hopefully they won't. I mean, Saturday is our biggest day, so there may be some cars that try to park there. I think with the road shift, hopefully they won't.
Will you put, so this will be blacktopped, right? Whereas you move the road over the airport, would be blacktop, maybe?
Correct.
Would you put a no parking, would you write down there someplace with signs up, no parking?
Well, I think when we put it back together and build it, it'll encourage to say, it won't be accessible to park there.
Okay. Did that about cover everything?
Yes. I just want to say thank you just to Glenn Fenner at the school with the algae bloom. We've had a whole bunch of camps going this week, and they've let us into the pool several different times this week, so that's been very nice.
You have good working relationships.
Yeah, and thank you, CJ, also for the upcoming next few things on the agenda.
I'm going to sit down.
But yeah, so we have the signs in place for the algae bloom. We will, even though swimming is not allowed at Salt Point, we will put signs up saying there is algae bloom, please do not go in the water. Even though there is no swimming, I just want to make that clear, there is no swimming allowed at Salt Point.
Right, but people do walk their dogs along the beach
Correct.
there, people do wade in the park, which is allowed, is my understanding, wade in the shoreline, and we just don't want.
No comment.
But we need to let our citizens know, and I'm really glad that it went out on the Swift 9/11 thing so that we can get the word out,
Yep.
because we don't want to people to drive all the way down there to discover it's closed. We want to get that word out as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly understand people's frustration as well. I mean, when it's 90 degrees, everybody wants to jump in the water, so, I mean, I understood, but it's just, we self-reported, we had to do it, the health department shut us down, and we just had to go through the proper steps, so.
So moving forward, in a perfect world, we'll put a sign that says no swimming allowed. When you lock that gate,
Yes.
that's all point.
Yeah.
You know, and go from there.
And they're bright red, so they stand out. There should be no question.
I had people asking me, and it took me a little bit to find out why the gate was down, because the gate was just down with no explanation. People were like, what happened? Why is this suddenly being closed?
And that's, I'll take the responsibility for that. It was an emergency type situation. I was more concerned about the place where people could swim and were supposed to swim than Salt Point. So,
I understand, and you're taking steps now to be able to, next time this happens,
Right.
because it will happen again, unfortunately.
Well,
That will be
yeah,
more-
yeah, and I mean, this is the first time it has happened for us, so.
like with any emergency, you have to react accordingly at the time.
Right.
You don't have time to review it and analyze it. You did what you did, and I commend you for that. Also commend you for the fact your attitude is now that we're going to try it in the future, how do we anticipate this and make it better?
Right.
So overall, no one got hurt, which is the first thing.
Yes.
From there, we can move on and tweak this, and like I said before, so like I said, kudos to you. What else you got?
That's it. Next.
Oh, I think you should mention that you've been having a successful recreation program that's taking a ton of time and effort, and it's really, you know.
Yeah, no, everything's going great. Day camp is full. We've had, all of our camps have been going really well. You know, heat and humidity have, you know, kids have to take breaks and more water breaks and swimming. And so, yeah, no, everything's been going very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we come to the main course. Cricket. Highway superintendent. So, if I can just wrap this up while Patrick's here, excuse me, Patrick?
Yes.
Do we need to do something about this fencing will cost $4,000.
Yes.
Is something we need from the board to say, we're okay with the budget model when it comes through next time? Or do you want to do something now to allocate the money? How do we want to do this?
This was not a budgeted item, and that's why both of us are coming to you to hopefully approve that.
We need to approve those things in
Right.
advance. That's our board is to decide how the money's spent, not
Right.
pass it,
Right.
approve it, and then agree to it after the fact. So
Once again, I'm asking for process. I don't.
Is 4,000 a hard number or is it a soft number?
No, 4,000 is a hard number.
So if we allocate 4,000, you're not going to come back and cry that we're $6 over or something?
No.
No, how about we say up to 4,000?
Up to
Okay.
4,000.
Do we need a motion for this?
I would move that we allocate from our fund balance $4,000 to whichever line that you would use for building fences. I'm not sure which one that is.
We would put it 7140.400.
Okay.
And then which balance would it be, out of the general fund?
General fund. I will move that.
Second.
All right, so I have a complete resolution, and I have a complete second. Any further discussion?
Let's make sure Jesse has a complete resolution. Did you get all that?
Well, I have a motion
Yeah.
to allocate up to $4,000 from the general fund balance to
7140.400.
7140.400.
Yep.
Okay. And I have Joe making the motion and Andrew seconding it.
Let me just check with Kai. Did I get the language right or did I miss something?
No, it's fine. I mean, it's a motion. Yep.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
So,
No, I wouldn't tell you until tomorrow anyway.
So you're going to take a roll, right? You say-
No, I just say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I say track home? Thank you. Aye.
Hi.
You are ready for your fence now?
Oh no, I got something bigger than Paris fence, but.
Use automobiles?
So it's not to really waste any more time on the audit process, but like with payroll, in my situation, obviously with all of the employees, I mean, payroll for me is similar to the voucher system already. I mean, when you're looking at implementing something, I mean, obviously, I do payroll for like 18 of the roughly 30 employees or whatever, that set down goes through her, so I mean, there is kind of a second set of eyes there.
You have a time clock also.
Correct, so.
There's your first, second, and fourth thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, so I mean, I submit mine, you know, she enters all of it, I guess, the final thing, whatever, but enough on that, I guess.
Well, we'll see what they recommend and then
Yeah.
figure out if it's implementable with town.
Okay. So, anyways, finally got a tub grinder here today, grinding up a massive pile of brush. I don't know if we'll get through all of it or not. We may be broke before that, but, so anyways, so we're on drainage projects, a lot of odds and ends getting done. You know, summer work's rolling on, things are coming along good. I sent an email earlier this morning. I don't know, maybe it didn't go through. I got a response from no one, so anyways, I bring that up. But if you look at your email on that, these auto flaggers that we have, state pricing on them, it's kind of the new thing as far as public traveling, safety and stuff like that. I'm renting a set for 2 months at the cost of roughly $4,000 a month, $27,000 to buy them. They certainly have a longevity of use to them, you know, so there again, I was just asking for consideration if we're, you know, we're gonna spend money on renting the things. So I mean, I rent them for 2 months this year, and 2 months next year, and, you know, in 2 months the following year or something, I essentially probably should have bought them because it's pretty
27,000?
Yes.
But now, the way I read your email was you're renting 2 of them in 1 by 1. Did you mean you're renting two?
Yeah, so they're a paired set, just like
Okay.
you see on the state highways are using and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So, and seeing, you know, the fund balance was healthy, you know, on the B side of the world, I just was kind of curious.
Conrad.
So no, I mean, just in the effort of, you know, public and my personal safety and stuff like that, I mean, it really makes a huge difference as you get into more of the denser areas and stuff like that. So like I said, I just was entertaining a motion to look at, you know, I just took them in on rent, you know, obviously versus paying $4,000 if I kind of could give them an answer in the next few days or something, said, hey, it's, you know, if we turn it into an invoice, obviously we're money ahead there.
Well, not only that, but if you use it for 40 hours, you're paying a guy $30 an hour on both ends. It's not going to pay one guy $30 an hour, so that's $1,200 you save.
Correct.
A week. Now, how many weeks are you going to use this?
A multitude of them.
I mean, but you're going to run it for 2 months.
Right.
So you're talking 1,200 times 8 weeks, now you're talking 10 grand, right?
Correct.
That's for the first one. So now you got 10 grand that you're spending, plus you got 8,000, now you're up to 18 as opposed to 27.
Right, so that's what I said, I mean, there's all those ways to look at it, I mean, there's truly a savings there and, you know, a safety factor, so I just was curious if anybody would entertain that idea of, you know, if we could, you know.
What I'm hearing is you use it more than you actually do now, because there's
Correct.
times in which it's kind of iffy, and you say, I can get away without it, and if you had it in stock, you would just use it because it wouldn't be an added expense.
Yeah, and
So
I mean, I really.
our crew would be safer as a result of buying
Correct.
these as well.
And there's really more of a demand, I mean, it really needs to be a little bit stricter as far as, you know, traffic control. I mean, these are really cut and dried pieces, it really helps the traveling public. It's cut and dried, it's not, hey, there's a little guy out there flying, oh, there's a big guy, I see him, I didn't see him down, you know. So, you know, it's what we.
These are those automatic gates that come down and they signal each other, so this one goes up and lets this cars go around the.
As you're doing road
So
work.
like there's one lane we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see on the state highways, the thing now, the arm comes down, red or yellow light.
There's one on 34 days.
Yep, yep. So anyways, just,
What's the expected life on one of these?
I would have to believe 20, 25 years. I mean, there's not a lot to it. I mean, there's parts and components that, you know, you can replace or whatever. The nice deal with this company is their actual rep lives right here in Auburn. So, I mean, if there's any issues or stuff like that, I mean, they're readily accessible. So, limited parts that can wear out things, so.
So are you asking for something tonight, or are you asking for us to put something together for next month, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need the money, right, it would be billed out for next month, so I mean, whatever, it's just a matter of,
Are you asking for permission to buy it now? And
I'm asking for permission and I'm asking for the money to buy it, how's that?
Okay. I'm just trying to find out whether it makes a difference.
You know, this is what my kids do to me, they don't just beat around the bush anymore, I want some money, no?
No, you want permission now to buy this, just like we did just like the fence.
Correct, but I would be asking for a budget mod, obviously, in August for it, if that was acceptable to you,
Well,
so.
I mean, I prefer that, as a town board, we do this, we authorize it now.
Correct,
And-
yes, to give them to go ahead and purchase it, yes, but I wouldn't need any action until the August meeting, of course, so. But yes, I do need permission to purchase, correct?
Okay. I will move that we give Cricket permission to buy a pair of these.
Thank you.
Pair of these, what did you say what they are?
I don't say
I,
Well, we're getting closer.
What's the technical name of these things?
Auto flaggers,
Auto flaggers, thanks.
There you go.
AF-54 is fine.
Let's do a timeout here and give our.
The new person, catch up here. So are you're making what, Joe? You're making a motion?
Motion that would give Cricket authorization to purchase a pair of auto flaggers up to, how much are we asking for?
27,000.
27,000. And these are on state contracts, you don't have to bid or anything.
Correct.
So to purchase auto flaggers?
A pair. I think they only come in.
Yeah, one's a pair.
What is it?
actually,
Yeah,
so-
one is no, yeah.
Yes.
Up to 27,000 and using state bidding, is that what I heard?
Correct.
So where would the money come from?
You.
No, I mean, which fund?
Oh, so DB would be nice, and we would just be a budget mod into the DB 5110-200.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Say it slowly so she can write it down.
So yes, I guess, the B side of the world would come out of. So I would be asking for a budget mod to be put into the DB 5110-200 as of the equipment, so.
Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
And you're seconding it, Andrew?
I like those. I really like those.
I do too.
I like the guy standing there with the stop sign and waves at me as I
No.
go by. That's my personal
But
preference.
they both wave at the same time, right?
I feel sorry for those guys. No, I like them.
I feel like we've got the easy job on it.
So we have
Not if the weather's
we have a, yes, we have a motion and a second. Do you-
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
That's pretty.
So,
Are you gonna ask for anything tonight? I mean.
So that, yes, move along with that aspect, and it's,
Now that you beat us up, go ahead.
and then over the last couple of years, obviously, through our consolidated highway funding, obviously, we got 200,000. The Pay New York money came through, and then before Senate actually, passed out or whatever they did this year, they did pass the early winter recovery. So there again, once again, I would ask if the possibility of being fronted that extra $86,000 that we'd be reimbursed for, on top of that, so.
We do this every year.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this is probably the last year unless the state changes something, but it's the Pave New York. So this extra money is slated to run out this year. So unless they do something different, I'll be back here next year asking for more anyway, so, but it's just nice if we have the opportunity to throw an extra project in there and we get reimbursed for that money. I mean, why not? Certainly do that, so.
You need our approval?
So it's $86,000 basically.
You need a resolution tonight?
Nope, that'll just be a budget mod at the end of the day, I think, so, I mean, that's kind of what we've done in the past, is it typically ends up being a budget mod on the DB side there. And like I said, I mean,
Then it's dumped back in.
we'll look back how we actually did it, but I believe it's just because it's not really, yes, it's an expenditure, but as soon as I turn my paperwork to the state, that money is deposited back in their account, so it's an expenditure, but was returned, so. Right, however you guys did that before.
So I'll ask Guy, what would be the proper procedure on this?
Well, I'm not even sure what funds you're talking about, or what fund they are put into.
DB 5112, 400.
Oh, I know where you want it to go. The question is it's like recycling. It goes into the A fund. So if the money isn't there, it's coming from fund balance until it's reimbursed, and bridge loan might be the right way to put it. But if you want to put $87,000 in a budget line, it's within your authority to do so.
That's exactly what we should
That's what we should do, is move 86, 87.
do. You found an extra thousand. That's great.
89, hey, what's 95? No, no.
I'm
So,
not
yeah.
what the number is.
Right, so, I mean, I believe it's like 86 and some change. I'd have to double check, so it's between 86 and 87,000. I mean, I could give you the exact amount.
So what we would do is we would move 86,000 in the DB over to line item 5112.400.
Yes, and that doesn't have to be a motion on it, I mean, because that we can confirm those numbers for August and look at September. I generally don't turn my state paperwork until towards the end of September.
So you can come to us with a written proposal in August with the right
Correct.
numbers and the right line items?
Yes, yep. So like I said, I just kind of want to throw that out there to say that, it's kind of, right, it's what we've done in the past.
I like applying for grants and getting money back, but it's what this is essentially doing. And I would suggest, yes, go forward, come to us with a proposal in August that we can vote on, please.
Excellent.
There you go. Do you need more money?
Oh, jeez.
Easy.
No.
Easy now.
No. So no, that's kind of it. So, I mean, come on, guys, it's been a couple months. What do you want? So, other than that, any questions or concerns, or we've we've mowed around the complete town once, and we're starting on the second time around again. I know that's frustrating for people because the state and the county is in Lansing right now. State, I haven't seen them mowing anywhere in town yet. You know what I
What
mean?
about the ditch up on Ridge Road, across from Swayze Road?
It'd be the state. So
State.
because we had that. Yeah, when it flooded over there a week ago on that. So and we've been doing that aspect. We haven't had any issues.
They didn't want to keep going either way.
No, it's just kind of
They're
doing.
not good at that.
No, so
Seriously, those roads up there are really
yeah, so.
tough.
But, yep. So I know some of you get frustration from people about the mowing and stuff. You know, I mean, do our best. Like, if there's a real dangerous situation, I'll make it a point to try to take care of it as soon as I can. But
The levy's not helping always.
right. So.
Okay, Mike.
So what's your timetable on that stretch right in front of the Red Bridge that was troubling you this winter?
That's actually, the ticket's in for it this week. And then there's the ticket we talked about a couple weeks ago, that's in. We got sidelined by some water main issues and things.
When you mean the tickets in, when?
So dig safely New York tickets. So obviously, the excavation law, make sure all the utilities are marked and stuff like that. So they've really clamped down on that. It's pretty stringent, so you don't want to be digging. And obviously in Lansing, the biggest issue is gas services.
So when do you think you'll start on that?
That, I was hoping to maybe move down tomorrow, depending on what the weather does, but that's slated this week and the next week to be worked on.
So you're going to tell us when the road's going to close? Tell me when the road.
Traffic will still be able to get through there when we're doing stuff, so.
Okay.
Auto flaggers would be done.
Yeah, we've got auto flaggers, so no, traffic will still be able to get through. It won't be anywhere near like the last extreme round down there, so. Positive, so. Excellent.
Okay, they'll just slow us down.
Well, it's supposed to be slow anyways for there.
It is.
Excellent, thanks.
Now we have CJ's report, planning report, CJ. Busy.
Yes, I will try to keep this brief. I'll try.
I'm seeing 3 pages here.
Yeah, we'll try to just zoom through it as quickly as we can. So, one of our first things is, it seems not a huge consequence, but we actually are reviewing our current development review applications, which sounds kind of like a drawl thing. I see our council clapping, so it's headed in the right direction. So in essence, what we're doing is revamping the way we ask people to provide information when we're getting ready to do a review of a variance or site plan or et cetera. And so I'm hoping to run those through the planning board and zoning board of appeals so they have a chance to, of course, be involved in the shaping of those documents and then have them rolled out hopefully beginning of next year. So it won't belabor that, but they'll come to you first, of course, so you kind of get an idea where we're going with that. We had our first Conservation Advisory Council meeting this past Monday, which I think was really energizing and I think a really cool group of people who are going to do some great work. And so we're about to start the process of collecting as many data layers as we possibly can to get a really great picture spatially, essentially, of what we're doing here, what we have here in the town, doing a full natural resources inventory. So let's see what else. The highlights, coordinating with Parks and Rec. Patrick's been a huge help trying to get this application together. We're applying next Friday to the consolidated funding application, so you have two resolutions in support of that particular application in front of you this evening. Of course, we know if you have concerns about that. The estimated cost to the town for that $1.2 million project, the cash cost is estimated to be $96,941. So Patrick and Highway have essentially pledged a lot of in-kind support to get that work done. And so if you're interested, I can get you the full application. It's very similar to the ones that were proposed in years past, but we've decided to, I don't recall if you applied for the bulkhead last time, but rather than include that in the parks application, we're going to ask the town's engineers to essentially itemize the cost of those materials and ask the highway if that's something they can get into their work plan in the coming year rather than chase money around. The reason why we wouldn't want to apply for that is because it's typically funded through local waterfront revitalization program money that's handed out by Department of State, but they won't do that. They won't actually grant you the money unless you have a local waterfront revitalization plan to go with any kind of program implementation. So that's something we actually talked about at CAC, and there could be a lot of really cool synergies with a bunch of different types of plans, parks and trails plans, waterfront revitalization plans, and so just getting a handle on this data and kind of where we want to go forward with planning will, I think, be a really good thing. So the cost of the town was estimated to be around $32,000 per year for the total improvements, which include unisex bathroom upgrades, let's see, what else? So the solar lighting to be able to have enhance the pedestrian experience in Myers Park. And of course, well, you probably looked already, but Pat can give you a full range of the plan. I think you've actually seen it now. This is probably the third year in a row that we've applied. So we hope to step up to the third pitch this time and hit a home run. So we'll do our best. So you'll see a whole mess of meetings and briefings I've attended, but also in front of you is the solar local law, which you should have received by email on the 3rd, as promised. You'll see in front of you tonight a seeker declaration of lead agency. This will help us get the ball rolling as far as environmental quality review goes, and I've in conversations with Tompkins County Planning to at least get an informal review of the local law done prior to the actual formal review process under GML 239, so that we have a sense of what their recommendations will be. I can tell you that we've had a couple inquiries from some large-scale solar developers regarding this local law. And I'd say one of the main concerns is the provision about limitations on placing large-scale solar arrays on actively farmed prime soil. So everybody knew this was always going to come down to this, so I'm kind of pushing the county to see what their formal recommendation would be, which I think is probably in line with that. So we'll see going forward. We're planning to do 2 public information sessions, and I've spoken to representatives of Lansing Star so we can get that out more publicly. They're Dan was kind enough to walk me through the public notification process and how the town can get a nice little blurb in the Lansing Star. We're planning on having a session on July 29th from noon to 2 and on August 7th between 5 and 7 so that folks can come and talk to myself and Lynn about how the code could affect them, affect their property, and just kind of do an informal open house style thing. We'll probably put a bunch of easels up with some, just foam core with, a little bit of background information on the law, kind of the highlights essentially, similar to something that I gave you with the memo, which I hope was very enticing with its graphics. I hope. So to also give you an update on Sperry Lane, we got 3 bids for the emergency removal of that. That's going to contract, and we expect that that will be done in very short order. So last but not least, a couple more things. There was an inquiry from the town board about where we stand with getting the ADA doors for the front. And so I believe that Doug and Lynn have come up with a scope of work and an estimated cost for that project, which I think is a fairly staggering $60,000 price tag to replace the front doors with kind of like a nice, I don't know how you... sliding, automatic sliding door system. But Justice Howell was kind enough to forward me the JCAP application, so the Justice Courts Assistance Program is an annual program offered to the courts to be able to do upgrades, the security or accessibility or furniture or whatever they might need. And I've asked, of course, if they intend to use any of the $30,000 maximum grant that you can apply for, and I haven't heard anything that they would need. Of course, we would, I'll be courteous and ask if they were also looking for anything, but otherwise, if not, then I would apply for the full $30,000 to offset the cost of this project, which of course benefits both the courts and the town. So that could be a really nice way to move forward. Those are due in October. So more on that. We'll be putting a resolution of support in front of you likely at the September meeting to be able to do that application. There's been some interest from town board and planning board members regarding the installation of electric vehicle charging stations in the town. And so I've done some background research on that, and there are some grants available. So we'll be sending you some information on that soon, which also leads me to the LED streetlight conversion program. There are some competing offers. One is from NYSEG and one is from the Power Authority. And so rather than have representatives come and pitch you competing offers, I've asked Terry Carroll from Cornell Cooperative Extension, who's really a great liaison as far as energy matters go, to come and speak about the LED programs that are available to us, as well as the EV charging stations. And so I've asked him to do that in August, so expect to see him here on August 21st for a brief presentation on that. And then last but not least, I received from Dave Herrick, town engineer, the concept plan for an additional pedestrian crossing across Auburn Road from what will be the new Salt Point Brewery, which is headed towards sketch plan review. So the first step of site planning, they're headed to the planning board this coming Monday. And so this kind of dovetails nicely with that. Once he gets the okay from Cricket, that could go on to DOT for their consideration. So essentially what that will do is allow for the non-motorized pathway, trail, sidewalk, whatever it may be, whatever surface it is, that Salt Point Brewery will be constructing at the edge of the right-of-way there to connect across to the TCAP bus stop, which is essentially immediately across the way, or will be once it's actually there. And I think that's...
Does that crosswalk require town board approval as well? Or?
It's only just in conceptual stages right now, but I imagine that it will, because it will also need DOT permission, which usually requires endorsement from the town as well. But God can speak to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, the town will be the applicant for the perm 33, so yeah, you have to ultimately approve it.
Right. Right. But it's just in concept now, and I wanted to make sure Cricket was okay with that before we proceeded any further. So I think that's really the highlights, and anything else you want to talk about, just give me up. absolutely.
I mean, we do have the money, we do, so it makes sense to me. That's a place we spend the money.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to Justice Gary Huddle in the town of Danby, who reminded me that these funds were available. They had gotten them last year to do some security upgrades there in the town hall, and he was nice enough to pass that information on to me. And Justice Howell was super great about making sure I got the information too. So we'll do our best and cross our fingers that we can win.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, engineers report, Dave Eric, there's nothing to report this time around, neither with the ag. Round number 18, resolution approving NICEA communications tower removal bond.
I'll move that.
Second. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 19, resolution authorizing the issuance of a $298,081.23 Lansing barn. I'll move it.
Second it.
Any further discussion?
I just question, do we have money sitting, is this one of the accounts that we've got money sitting around waiting to be used to look money?
No, this is the Warren Road sewer. Once again, the uniqueness is it's 2.5%. The uniqueness is, I mean, it's a great problem to have, where the bonds are still higher than the barns, so we'll roll it over again, and we'll probably have, the board will have this discussion next year also.
It's a special district, so you can't put general funds in it that way.
No, but some of our districts have got money sitting in them, and I just didn't have time to look up to see if this was one of those.
It might be, don't. Yeah.
So we roll it over. Any further discussion?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 20, resolution authorizing grant applications to implement Myers Park Master Plan.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Ed Levine.
Yes. Item 21, resolution approving application for funding from the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation for the purpose of funding the development of Myers Park Master Plan.
I'll move that.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 22, resolution declaring intent to establish lead agency for adoption of a local law to amend the land use ordinance relating to solar and wind energy systems. I'll move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item number 23, resolution accepting Tompkins County Municipal Housing Authority grant agreement to implement town center traffic impact study.
I'll move it.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 24, resolution hiring part-time seasonal employees for park and recreation for the town of Lansing.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Ed Levine.
Yes. Item 25, resolution authorizing Pitney Bowes postage meter lease.
I'll move that.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. 27, approve audit budget modifications.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Joe moved it,
Yeah.
correct? And
I second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Andrew Benson.
Yes.
Doug Dave.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 28, board member reports. Joe, you want to go?
Sure. The bulk of the TCOG meeting on June 27th was a discussion of the county's energy strategy. Internally, they're going to focus by leading with example of their own facilities. Their external focus is by supporting and facilitating ways to work to reduce fossil fuel dependency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions for other projects. I couldn't make the IO meeting on the 26th, because we were all here listening to the program about the power plant conversion. But I reviewed their minutes, and they were discussing the joint IO Water Resources Council meeting that they had the previous month. And they're looking at their project advisory committee members and moving that whole project forward. And they're also looking at the Cuba Lake waterfront networks, various models for conservation. On the 28th, I met with Andy Zepp with the Land Trust and started talking about the Sims project that we voted on tonight. The ITC planning committee, I didn't make, but you made it, and they're basically talking about their draft report,
Yeah, long-range transportation plan. Yeah.
which I think you all got emailed to you. I think that went out to the whole board, and you should look that over. Comments are due at the end of this month.
Yeah, end of July.
End of July, so there's still a couple of weeks for people to put in comments. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the website, which is looking way better than before. I'm really happy with it to a large degree. But I'd still like to tweak some stuff, right? It's all this tiny stuff that's going to take forever. And, you know, it's things like the style for each boards is different from one. If you go from the planning board to the zoning board of appeals to the town board, the style of each page is completely different. Some of this stuff.
Again, those are employee content things.
Yeah.
I've tried over the years to establish patterns for similar things so that everything appears the same. I have not been able to do that. And when you look at all of the kind of stereotypical tropes about doing something by committee, that's basically what we're faced with. So in my head, and again, I just work here, boss. I don't have the authority to tell the departments what to do. But in my head, there should be an employee in this building who is the czar of the website, who makes these decisions and enforces them with the rest of the staff.
Would that be, would you think it'd be our IT guy?
Well, this is why I say I hesitate to do it, because Patrick has so many hats now that he's going to need a few more heads. He's really overloaded, in my opinion. So I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is. Officially, when we started this, when I started this gig, it was Sharon Bowman, but she didn't really do very much to enforce it. And when Charmaine came on, I had it in my head that she would sort of take on that role, but it was not. It was just in my head. You know what I mean? So I don't know who should do it, but I do think that it should be someone. And I really believe strongly it should be someone who works in this building, whoever that person might be.
Can we also do some?
Let me just finish this. Sorry. That person would also be responsible for knowing when updates need to be made in various areas of the site. I was just paid, well, I guess you can approve it tonight. I will soon be paid.
We already paid, we just approved it a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay. So I never know what all those.
That was the budget modifications and all that.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So the check's in the mail. So to do updates to the, they used to be called handy links, and now it's called links on the website. And essentially, it is handy links to every government that represents Lansing people. And we still had Senator Mazzolio in it. We had all kinds of, I think Rachel was still on. Anyway, it was only a couple of hours of work, but somebody had to do it. So this should also be in that person's bag of web responsibilities.
Send me a list of the job description and the duties. And so we did a budget model. We're going over the budget with your expertise now. Maybe what we need to do, since this website is up and running, is that as long as it's functional, do a timeout for a month or so and see if there's any critical things that come up. It's like the It's like the 2-week theory when you build your own house, you give it 2 more weeks if it's still a concern, and you go back to it.
And
Or it also gives us a chance to accumulate all the different concerns and do it all at once as opposed to maybe on a monthly basis or 2 months at a time, to see if it's really a concern or not.
Well, there have been some ongoing things, like today, Jesse sent me a note about the Laserfish links. And it turned out that Microsoft browsers didn't work with those links. And they wanted to, we still don't really understand what was happening. But I had to spend an hour and a half today going through every Laserfish link on our site. There's a considerable amount of duplication on that as well, because we have different ways for people to get to, say, planning board docs or town board agendas or those sorts of things. So we are, as we have been all along, we are maintaining. But in terms of policy and procedural things, like what Joe is talking about, somebody should have the last word for everybody so that these pages look the same. Because I actually agree with what Joe said. The different department pages, there might be one thing over here that's over here on another department. And the key to a successful website or any kind of media thing is to have consistency, where you build something, that you build the expectations of the user, and then you stay within those expectations in the whole thing. And as you know, I started my career as a stage designer, and that was like drama 101. If you want people to suspend their disbelief, you have to create a world and then not break the rules of that world.
I like the idea of trying to put together a list, because there's a bunch of things, and it's like a punch list of stupid little things, but it breaks the world. So for example, when you click on the department planning code, or when you do the department page, it's called code and inspections, but when you do the pull down, it's called planning department code enforcement.
I think I fixed that the other day.
I looked at it today.
Really? I thought I caught them all.
Yeah, I know.
So let's just keep talking back
But
and
it's going to
forth.
take a bunch of us going through the thing and seeing these things, because there's so many different pages. and
Okay, you
lines.
don't have to convince us of this.
Yeah.
What needs to be done is we move on. We have an action plan that this is a work in progress. So let's keep massaging this when critical. But there's also times we do a timeout and just try to implement what we have, and then we can have a better workload afterwards.
Well, what I'm hearing is the action plan is two-part. One part is you're going to kind of give a job description so that we have an idea of what we're asking this person to do.
And I don't think it's a huge job, but I think someone has to do it. That's the deal.
But we need to be able to talk with our employees and say, here's what we're asking. Can you fit this into your time and have a realistic? And I think the other thing is for all of us to kind of use the website a little bit over the course of the next month. And when you see things that don't feel right, that pull you out of that, as you're describing, pull you out of the website and make you have to think harder to go through, let's compile a list. And, I'd be willing to be the compiler of it, because I'm certainly doing it already. and so that we can just go through and give you a punch list of, hey, if we do all this stuff, we can take it up that one more notch that it really needs to go to really be looking as professional as it ought to.
And I like punch lists. I work really well. I just go down the list.
Okay. Anything else, Joe?
And I'm still working with Pat to get a photo of the wheeler plaque.
Okay. Yep.
I was just going to comment on the library. They had an extremely successful sign-up day for summer reading, and they also now have adults signing up, which is kind of cool. So you go and you sign up, and then it's just whatever books you read, and they realize that a lot of adults pick up more books in the summer, so that's kind of neat. And then they had to use book sale the same day, and they said that was a new idea, and it worked out really quite well. For the Lansing Youth Services, the last meeting was in June. I did attend because it was at my house, so that made life really easy for me. I just had to provide all the goodies to eat. And we won't have another meeting until September as far as the commission. But the programs are going very well, and one program that was started, oh goodness, probably 8 years ago, maybe 10, is a fishing derby, which is open to all age kids, kids over 99, and they have a fishing day. And what's the coolest thing about it is if somebody forgets to bring their fishing rod, they have rods. They have everything for the kids. And then they have somebody fillet the fish and cook the fish, so the kids can actually have a little meal. And everybody gets prizes for the biggest fish, the littlest fish, the ugliest fish. Yeah. And then I just will repeat what CJ said. It was a good first meeting of the Conservation Board there. Good group of people.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Doug?
Not much other than efforting to try to get the resolution fees tempered.
Okay.
Maybe for August. We're going to have that.
Okay. Is not here. Guy, you want to talk about the closing? Close the point. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, that, the lot D closed, and 104 Auburn Road is under contract, and surveys done, abstracts on its way over. That might be pretty quick, because we know the history. It
Right.
was ours, so there's not much to look at in terms of title.
Is it just one, jump, or did we sell it to somebody who sold it to somebody and then sold it?
There's two jumps, but we've looked at the title previously, like not even a year ago, because it's the second time we entered into an attempted purchase transaction. This time it resulted in signature. So there's not a lot to it. It's more of a numbers thing, and I think it's more important for the town to be thinking forward as to planning for that site, that use, because there's infrastructure there that's valuable, not just the trail, but there's buildings. But other than that, those are a lot of those types of things, including the various water districts. Most of that has wound up. We're about to enter into Water District 3, the easement phase on that, which will be extensive because of its size. But Water District 5 is moving along. We're just waiting for the clock to run on a couple of small things, but other than that, the only thing I have to report is this very, very short matter for executive session on the hair performance of a particular person. It'll take 2 minutes, literally, but it should be executive session.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Do you know what the size of that building is over there at my school's store?
There's actually 3 buildings, and I'm pretty sure one of them is actually a permanent structure. The one we were thinking.
Right, the old highway department.
Right. There's now 3 structures there.
Pavilion, the scoops, and that, right?
Right. I don't know the actual building size yet, but I was able to confirm that the equipment that's in the Scoops building belongs to the tenant, that it was a vanilla box and they moved in and built out with coolers and restaurant equipment, what is there. So that at least makes it easier for us with ordering equipment.
Have we reached out to the tenant and talked about moving forward with that at all?
Not yet. The seller has asked, we've agreed to accept their lease because it extends longer than we wanted, simply because I think the feeling was that an ice cream stand is a good amenity for the trail. But I did forward, after I got the signature, a sample licensing, franchise license agreement, like for what we do with paddle and board down at the park, so that they could be familiar with what they're looking at and realize that it's not scary to convert from a lease to a license, but that'll be up to them.
Would it cost them significantly more than?
I think it would end up costing them less because they wouldn't be they wouldn't be paying taxes because the town wouldn't have a tax bill. It would have to raise rent to cover. And as a license, they'd only be paying for the months that they're actually open. And frankly, if you want an amenity like that on your trail, you want to incentivize it by making it profitable and giving them the reason to stay there.
Are we offering them the ability to switch over before their lease is over?
I would do it as soon as you could, once you obtain title, yes. I mean, I think, because governments generally aren't in the business of leasing. This would be a lot like the concession stand at the park. It's really in that vein. It should be like a license agreement. Even the New York State Park System will only do licenses, not leases.
Okay, we can follow up the details later then.
And just your question about the buildings, there's a building built in 1970 there, 2,820 square feet, and one built in 2002, 336 square feet. That's what's there in place as permanent structures.
So what was the bigger one?
2820.
2820, and what's the cost per square foot? 50,000 square foot.
More than that. It depends if it's a vanilla box, and you're also dealing with something that was built, that's a block building, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's more.
Good bathrooms.
Well, it's not tall,
That's all. I don't want to pull up too much for the executive session. I just was curious as to what it was.
So do we have some thought of who's going to start discussing what we're doing with that property, where that is?
Well, I'm not trying to suggest anything, but it is sort of a planning issue. I think we actually we've already started that process in a sense, because we have the Trails Committee and the Town Center Committee looking at this issue in terms of what are the long-term trail plans, how do we tie in funding with some of the other things that are going on in the town center, and I think this has got to be on the initial radar.
So some of the things that have been kicked around, I'll wrap this up because I don't want to stay here until the sun up, is you have a bathroom there already. Maybe renovate and do another bathroom like you do the bathrooms over the ball fields, so you have access to public use. That land, you get that flat land there, maybe do another soccer field or athletic field over there. Do something, maybe do a cross-country course. The bay door that's open, you can put the erective equipment over there if you need to move it, use it for that. There's a variety of different things we can do, because those leases, I think, are up already, if I'm not mistaken.
They'll run out before the end of the year.
Yeah. So those are ideas that have been kicked around, but those are just ideas right now. Once again, once we get in our hands, then we'll be more serious about this. And that's where the input will come in from the department heads also, what they think they can use it for. So that's where we're going with that. I'm going to slide on over to this real quick, and then I'm going to take a 2-minute break to go to the bathroom. I'll go fast. Patrick did a great job with the fence implementation. They now have tournament style over there. They also have home runs now, so people are going wild about that, which leads us up to doing things like a concession stand, doing more fundraising for them over there. It feeds on that because now you do tournaments over there, so that's all good. He's also keeping an eye on the food giveaway that's happening that was just implemented, I think, with Sue Treasy, and also with Linda Pasto. That's the first thing. Spectrum, we had a wonderful discussion with Spectrum. We're putting in the lines that were lowered, and the farmers were going to get in the fields. They also had wires in their hay, so they had to throw away some of the hay. So I made a few inquiries to the people that were there, and I was very point blank about my concerns. They've now reached out to people like Linda Davidson and Jeff Cook. They're working on that. They're going to rectify that. A couple of different dynamics. To their defense, they asked for the easements for the NYSEG lines for the poles. They can only go so far. So not knowing that's not far enough, they've worked out a way to make those higher. So I'm not going to rub their nose in it. Simply say thank you for your help, much appreciated. Mike Long is working on the reimbursement for the money for the power plant as it decommissions, because those funds should be available. We bring this up to the power plant assessment. I've talked to Jerry Goodenow. The assessment will stay at $20 million for our budget season this year. Next year, there'll be another pilot negotiation as that decreases. So that'll be a decrease because there's nothing there to take its place. Speaking of which, we hope to have some sort of answer by the end of July if the New York Power Authority will allocate that power or not. Speaking of which, the assessments I mentioned earlier, Shop Significant has decreased $5 million down to $14 million from 19. That affects us. And I said before, the power plant's at $20 million. The budget season has started as far as the emails going out to the department heads. The salary cap is at 2%, which is a vague number, even though it's a rock solid 2%, it isn't, because there's so many different dynamics going on. do the calculations, such as drainage districts, which is a special district, actually affects that tax cap that I find amazing. Why the sewer districts don't do it, why the water districts don't do it, but we've already passed a resolution to override the tax cap. That was done in March. Two more things, investment policy, that was on the resolution for tonight. I want to revisit that because there's a lot of money floating around out here getting spent. I don't know, the amounts might have to be decreased. It might just be 6 months instead of a year. You all have that sheet about the collateralized, which is in your packet. That shows you basically what the top of the trust company does to protect our money. They invest it as a 2% over that so they allocate 2% over what we have there in the bank. So it is protected. So we do not have to, only if you invest only $250,000. We can go up to more than that with one lump sum. The last thing, which you probably saw in your emails, and this is a lot of kudos to Charmaine, sexual harassment courses. Every employee, everybody who works for us, one way or another, every vendor has to sign off on a sexual harassment policy. The vendors and everything, that's up to the employer. So, for instance, the ones who clean our bathrooms, that's up to the employer to make sure they sign off on that. This is the first year that they've done that. They also do blood-borne pathogens, they do a variety of different stuff. I do this every year at the pharmacy. We go down with a checklist every year. You slip the modular, you print out the certificate, you get one copy of the HR person, one copy of your file, and you continue to do that, so this is nothing new to me. The bad news is now you have to do it. And the first year, it is more, how do I implement the policy? After that, the checklist. Everyone who had we sat in and did the sexual harassment here, qualifies, they're fine. You may have to do it, you may have to do it, you may have to do it. Charmaine will contact you. There are modules to do it.
She already has.
Fine. Okay, so having said all that, every lifeguard, every soccer coach for 2 weeks, whatever, they have to all go through that. It takes about 2.5 hours. And once again, another unfunded mandate that somebody's got to pay for. It's not New York State. So, other than that, I'd like to take a 5-minute break, and then you want to go to the executive session quickly? Or do you want to go to the executive session right now?
Let's do 2 minutes so everybody.
2 minutes. Take a 2-minute break.
If they did it right now, does the town have a bucket in their budget